The awakening, at the roof of the world high in the spine of South America, where the earth seems to scrape the edge of heaven, the wind carries whispers of an age the world forgot. The Andean plateau, vast, cold, and luminous beneath a sky of burning blue, guards the ruins of a story older than empires, older perhaps than memory itself. Here, at an altitude where breath becomes prayer, lies Tiwanaku and its shattered companion, Puma Punku. Stones the size of locomotives lie strewn like toys of gods, cut with surgical precision that defies time, logic, and the limits of ancient hands. But before they were ruins, these places were something else, something living. Tiwanaku was once a city of sun and geometry, aligned with celestial cycles, breathing in rhythm with the stars. Puma Punku, only a short distance away, was a mystery within a mystery, a megalithic platform of red sandstone and andesite blocks carved with interlocking perfection. Each corner, each groove, each angle seems calculated with mathematics so advanced it could only belong to minds guided by cosmic law. Yet the true question, the one that burns beneath every theory, every excavation, every whispered legend, is not how these monuments were built, but who taught them to build. Local legend speaks of a time before time when the world was drowned in darkness. Then, from the foam of Lake Titicaca, a luminous being rose, tall, robed in white, his face radiant, his beard shining like the morning sun. His name was Viracocha, the great creator. He did not emerge as a conqueror, but as a teacher. He walked the lands of the Andes, bringing light where there had been shadow, order where there had been chaos. With words and symbols, he shaped a new humanity. According to the chronicles written centuries later by the Spanish, the people described him as a god of the sky, a bringer of civilization. They said he came not alone, but with companions, mysterious beings of similar form, who descended from the heavens, taught language, stonecraft, astronomy, and the laws of harmony. When their work was done, they vanished into the sunrise, promising to return when the world needed them again. And in the wind that moves across the Altiplano, that promise still lingers. Modern archaeology describes Tiwanaku as the heart of a pre-Incan culture that flourished between 400 and 1000 CE. But the stones tell another story, one that seems to predate the civilization itself. Geological erosion on some blocks, astronomical alignments that match epochs far older than the accepted timeline, and myths that speak of cycles of creation and destruction. All these fragments hint at a forgotten dawn. What if Tiwanaku was not the beginning, but a memory? What if its builders were heirs to a knowledge that came from elsewhere, passed down through survivors of a cataclysm, or delivered by those the ancients called the gods of the sky? As the mist rolls over the ruins at dawn, the blocks of Puma Punku catch the light, their faces glowing like embers of an old fire. To the untrained eye, they are nothing but stone. But to those who listen, to those who truly see, they are frozen echoes of a technology so refined that it borders on the miraculous. Perfect right angles, interlocking joints with tolerances measured in millimeters, and surfaces polished smoother than steel. The Andean people say these were shaped by the sound of the gods, by frequencies that moved stone as if it were clay. Legends say Viracochas spoke to the mountains, and the mountains obeyed. If this is merely myth, it is one of astonishing precision. But if there is truth hidden within it, then we are staring at the ruins not just of a city, but of a lost science, a sacred technology rooted in the bond between heaven and earth. To the ancient Andeans, the gods were not distant abstractions. They walked among men, shared their bread, measured the stars with them. The boundary between mortal and divine was thin, almost transparent. When the Inca rose centuries later, they inherited the echo of that communion. their temples, their rituals, their golden suns, all traced back to Tiwanaku and to the luminous figure who first gave them knowledge. The question remains, who was Viracocha? Was he merely a mythologized memory of a great teacher? Or was he, as many native traditions claim, one of the sky beings, visitors from the stars who came in the age before the flood? The Spanish chroniclers were puzzled by what they found. The Andeans told them that these gods were white-skinned and bearded. Unlike the people of the region, they came in shining garments, bearing staves that could summon thunder. They traveled across mountains and oceans, teaching the same wisdom to distant peoples. Even now, fragments of that same myth appear in other parts of the world, from the feathered Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica to the civilizing Owans in Mesopotamia, and even the shining gods of Egypt's Zep-Tepi. Could these have been separate memories of a single forgotten event, one that left its fingerprint across the ancient world? In the silent ruins of Tiwanaku, the answer feels close enough to touch. The air vibrates with a presence, as if the stones themselves remember the hands that shaped them. Every carved groove, every fallen block, seems to whisper the same riddle. We were taught, we were shown. We did not build alone. And if that is true, then our entire understanding of history trembles on its foundation. The echo of stone and star. But what came next would change everything. When the first rays of dawn touched the stones of Tiwanaku, something extraordinary happened, a play of light and shadow that repeated itself not by chance but by design. On the solstices and equinoxes, the sun aligns perfectly with the gateways and walls, casting geometric patterns that trace the celestial calendar with breathtaking accuracy. The ancient builders had encoded the heavens into the very bones of their city. Tiwanaku was not merely a settlement, it was an observatory, a cosmic map carved into the earth. Archaeologists have long studied its monumental gate, the Gateway of the Sun, a single block of andesite weighing nearly 10 tons, carved with reliefs that seem to merge art and mathematics. At its center stands a radiant figure, eyes wide, crowned with rays, holding staffs in both hands. Around him, winged beings march in precise order, their faces serene and timeless. Many call the central figure Viracocha, the bringer of light. Yet others whisper that what we see there is not just art, but an ancient transmission, a story etched in stone, encoding a cosmic event witnessed by the ancients themselves. The patterns on the gate correspond not only to solar alignments, but to star positions that match the sky as it appeared nearly 17,000 years ago, long before the official timeline of any Andean civilization. To imagine that such astronomical data could have been preserved for tens of millennia defies conventional history. Yet the stones do not lie. Their geometry speaks the language of precision, a silent logic that resists the erosion of time. In this light, Tiwanaku and Puma Punku appear not as isolated relics, but as fragments of a once unified system, an ancient network of energy, astronomy, and sacred science that connected the mountains, the lakes, and the heavens. Across the Andes, sites like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo display similar signatures, stones locked with impossible precision, angles that mimic constellations, tunnels aligned with solstitial light. It is as though the entire Andean spine was designed to resonate with the cosmos, as if the builders had tapped into a universal frequency. The Andean priests, the Amautas, spoke of that frequency. They said that every stone carries a vibration and that the ancients knew how to awaken it. When the right sound was spoken, the tone of creation, the stones would move, lift, and settle into place as if guided by invisible hands. To modern ears, it sounds like myth. Yet today, physicists speak of acoustic levitation and resonant harmonics, concepts that echo those ancient tales with uncanny similarity. Could it be that what the Amautas described was not magic, but a form of science we have simply forgotten? The legends say Viracocha's followers carried with them instruments that sang. They used these sounds to shape the world, to smooth stone, to mark the sky, to divide light from shadow. Wherever they went, civilization blossomed. But when they departed, the world dimmed again, and humanity fell into amnesia. And still, the people remembered. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they were startled to hear that the Inca awaited the return of a white-bearded god who had once promised to come back from the east. Many of them believed the prophecy referred to Viracocha. Others saw in it the echo of a far older myth, one that spanned oceans and continents. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs and Maya spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who too was described as a tall, fair-skinned teacher who came from the stars, taught the arts of civilization, and then vanished across the sea. The similarities between Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl are too precise to ignore. Both beings are associated with light, wisdom, and a promise of return. Both are linked to the same celestial cycles. Both are described as sky gods who arrived after a great flood. Could these stories be fragments of the same lost chapter, a collective memory of contact with beings not of this earth? Modern researchers like Arthur Poznansky and more recently, scholars of archaeoastronomy have dared to suggest that Tiwanaku's construction predates 10,000 BCE. Poznansky claimed that the site once stood at the level of the sea before geological upheaval raised the altiplano nearly 2 miles higher. His calculations, based on solar alignments, pointed to a construction date around 15,000 BCE, at the very end of the last ice age, when glaciers were retreating and the world was being remade. If true, then Tiwanaku was not a product of the Andean Bronze Age. It was a survivor of a lost world, perhaps a world destroyed by flood and fire, remembered in myth as the time when the gods walked among men. Even the stones of Puma Punku seem to bear scars of that catastrophe. Many blocks appear as if shattered by a colossal force, thrown across the plateau as if an earthquake or explosion had struck with unnatural violence. The very name Puma Punku, meaning door of the puma, carries an air of transition, as if it were a threshold between worlds, the place where humanity once crossed from ignorance into illumination. Standing before those ruins, one feels a strange hum beneath the silence. It is as though the stones themselves are not dead but asleep, waiting, listening, remembering. The cold Andean wind moves through the cracks, producing tones that seem almost deliberate, like the faint echo of a forgotten hymn. It is the sound of history breathing, and if we listen closely enough, we may hear what it's been trying to say all along, that humanity did not rise alone. For in the shadow of those colossal gates, under the eternal gaze of the Andes, the line between God and man begins to blur. The question that haunted the explorers, priests, and chroniclers for centuries still remains. Were these myths born from imagination or from memory? The answer lies not only in what we find beneath the soil, but in what we are willing to remember. And as the night descends once more upon Tiwanaku, the stars begin to burn in perfect symmetry above the ancient ruins, as if they are aligning again, calling something back. The descent of Viracocha, something that once came from the sky. The night over Lake Titicaca is unlike any other. The stars do not merely shine, they pulse, shimmer, and seem to breathe with the rhythm of the cold Andean wind. In that rarefied air, the sky is so vast, it feels closer than the ground itself. To the ancient people who gazed upon it, this was not the ceiling of the world, it was a mirror. They believed that above the stars lay the realm of the gods, and through the lake's shimmering surface, those gods could descend. According to the oldest legends preserved in oral tradition, Viracocha emerged from the waters after a great darkness that had covered the earth. The world was silent, cold, and still. Mountains had fallen, the sun had vanished, and the remnants of a forgotten age lay buried beneath ash and ice. Then from the foam of the sacred lake, the Creator arose. His body glowed with light. He wore a cloak of shining threads and carried a staff that hummed like thunder. Wherever his feet touched the ground, life returned. The grass grew green, the rivers sang again, and the sun rose anew. The people who saw him said he was not alone. From the sky came other luminous beings, descending in columns of fire or light, their presence so bright that no mortal could look upon them for long. These were the companions of Viracocha, described as tall and radiant, their garments glittering like the surface of the lake. They came not as conquerors, but as teachers. Together they traveled across the Andes, naming the mountains, placing the stars, and instructing the survivors of the cataclysm in the arts of rebuilding the world. Everywhere they went, they left signs, sacred geometry, cosmic alignment, and the memory of impossible knowledge. From the shores of Titicaca to the valleys of Cusco, from the deserts of Nazca to the jungles beyond the mountains, their footprints became the foundation of future empires. They taught how to measure the heavens, how to plant by the cycles of the moon, and how to carve stone so that it would resonate with the music of creation itself. But there was something else, something the old chroniclers rarely understood. The Andean elders spoke not only of teaching, but of awakening. Viracocha and his companions did not merely instruct. They activated something within the human mind, a dormant capacity to remember what had been lost in the flood. He opened their eyes, says one Quechua tale, so they could see as the gods see. Could this be a metaphor for the leap of consciousness that marks humanity's mysterious acceleration? The sudden rise of architecture, writing, and astronomy thousands of years before logic would allow it? Or is it possible that Viracocha's awakening was literal, that these sky beings triggered an evolution of understanding through contact, sound, or even technology so advanced it appeared divine? When the Spanish chroniclers arrived centuries later, they were bewildered by the consistency of these stories. The Inca priests told them that Viracocha had been seen walking westward along the Pacific coast, accompanied by men of shining countenance. At every village, he taught kindness, order, and wisdom. He forbade war, he healed the sick, and when his mission was complete, he stepped into the ocean and vanished into the horizon, promising to return one day from the same direction he had gone. For generations, the people watched the sea, waiting, and when white bearded men finally appeared from the east, across that same ocean, the memory of the prophecy flared again, though this time the visitors brought not light, but conquest. Yet behind the tragedy of that misinterpretation lies something deeper, a question that refuses to fade. Who was this radiant teacher whose memory endures in every Andean tale? Was Viracocha a symbolic reflection of cosmic order, the embodiment of divine wisdom? Or could he have been one of the mysterious sky beings, a traveler from beyond, whose presence forever altered the course of human civilization? Across the high plains, myths speak of fiery disks that descended in storms of light, of thunderbirds that roared across the heavens and landed upon mountain peaks. Even today, shepherds in remote valleys tell stories of glowing spheres that move silently across the night sky. The eyes of Viracocha, they call them. The connection between heaven and earth has never truly been severed. It merely waits for us to remember its language. And perhaps it is no coincidence that Tiwanaku was built precisely where these legends say the gods first walked. The temples rise as if in imitation of the heavens, their platforms reflecting constellations, their corridors whispering of star maps encoded in stone. The ancients called it the City of the Sun, but some researchers believe it was far more, a landing ground, a communication hub, or even a teaching site for an ancient cosmic order. If the Andean people truly learned from sky beings, then Tiwanaku and Puma Punku are not monuments to human labor alone. They are messages, written in geometry, waiting to be read. When night falls over the Altiplano and the Milky Way stretches like a river of light across the sky, it aligns perfectly with the layout of Tiwanaku's sacred center. Above, the stars burn in the same pattern as the temples below, as if heaven and earth were reflections of each other. Was this alignment a coincidence or a declaration? The ancients seemed to be saying, as above, so below, as in the stars, so upon the earth. And so, the legend of Viracocha is not just about creation, it is about connection. It reminds us that the gods of the Andes may not have vanished at all. Perhaps they simply returned to the stars from which they came, waiting for a time when humanity would once again look upward and remember. But if Viracocha came from the heavens, what exactly were those heavens? Were they the celestial realms of spirit, or the literal skies, filled with worlds and travelers far older than our own? That question, the bridge between mythology and possibility, is what drives explorers and dreamers to this day. For in the Andes, myth and matter intertwine, and the sky itself seems to whisper, "We were never alone." Yet deep beneath the ruins of Tiwanaku, beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence, something even more astonishing waits to be uncovered. Proof, perhaps, that the sky beings left behind more than just stories. And what lies buried there may be the key to everything. The hidden foundations beneath Tiwanaku. But what archaeologists discovered next would shake the very foundations of history. For centuries, Tiwanaku appeared to be simply what was visible on the surface. A collection of colossal temples, monolithic gates, and scattered stones eroded by wind and time. Yet beneath that wind-swept plateau, hidden below layers of sediment and silence, the true scope of the mystery began to emerge. Modern excavations, aided by ground-penetrating radar and magnetometric scanning, revealed something astonishing. Tiwanaku was far larger, far older, and far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. Beneath the visible ruins lies an entire subterranean network, corridors, chambers, and geometric foundations aligned with unnerving precision. The site is not a mere collection of temples, it is a labyrinth. Some tunnels stretch toward Puma Punku, suggesting the two were once part of a single engineered complex, perhaps even constructed as one unified design. Others spiral downward into chambers whose purpose remains unknown. The local Aymara people have long whispered that beneath Tiwanaku sleeps the heart of the earth, a chamber sealed since the age of the gods. Archaeologists describe these foundations as anomalous. The stones below the surface are older than those above them, cut with an even higher degree of accuracy. It is as though the builders of later ages merely restored or built upon something far more ancient, the way one civilization might repurpose the ruins of another whose technology it could no longer replicate. Dr. Oswaldo Rivera, one of Bolivia's early researchers of the site, once remarked that the lowest strata of Tiwanaku seemed to have been melted into place rather than carved. The edges of certain andesite blocks are fused together in a way that suggests they were softened by extreme heat, a feat impossible by known ancient methods. The air at that depth still carries a faint metallic tang, as though something unnatural had once burned there. This revelation gave new life to the ancient legends. The Aymara tell of a time when the gods descended with rods of fire and reshaped the land. They say that Viracocha's companions forged the foundations of Tiwanaku using the power of the stars, a phrase that might once have meant energy or technology lost to myth. Even more curious are local stories of humming beneath the ground, a resonance that can still be felt if one stands quietly near the sunken temple on certain nights when the air is still. Some claim it is the song of the earth itself. Others believe it is the echo of machines still asleep beneath the stone. When radar surveys in the late 20th century detected metallic reflections deep below the site, objects arranged in precise grids, speculation exploded. Were these remnants of ancient tools or evidence of something far more extraordinary? Some researchers propose that Tiwanaku might conceal not just architecture, but mechanisms, devices used to harness geomagnetic or acoustic energy, perhaps the same forces once employed to move its massive stones. The ancients called the site Taipikala, the stone in the center of the world. According to Andean cosmology, this was the place where heaven and earth first met, the point of creation. Myth and excavation seem to converge on this idea. Tiwanaku was constructed upon a natural node of energy, a geologic vortex where telluric currents and cosmic alignments intersect. Even today, sensitive instruments record magnetic anomalies at the site that defy easy explanation. But what was this place for? Was it a temple, a machine, or both? When Viracochas priests spoke of the heart of the earth, they described it as a portal through which the gods could communicate with the stars. To modernize, this sounds like poetic symbolism. Yet deep in the substructure of Tiwanaku, archaeologists discovered acoustic chambers engineered to amplify sound frequencies. A whisper in one corner resonates throughout the complex, modulating in ways that suggest a deliberate calibration of tone. Some researchers have speculated that these chambers could have been used for ceremonial purposes, or perhaps, in the language of the ancients, to speak with the heavens. Could these rooms have functioned as early forms of communication technology, resonant transmitters designed to amplify sound, light, or electromagnetic energy? The thought seems absurd, yet the precision of the engineering refuses to be dismissed. The walls of these chambers contain tiny grooves and indents that act like waveguides, focusing vibration rather than dispersing it. At the center of one room, there is a polished stone basin that produces a haunting hum when struck, a tone so pure that it can cause small objects nearby to tremble. To those who believe the old legends, this is no coincidence. The hum is the voice of Viracocha, still echoing through the veins of his city. Standing within those underground passages, it is easy to feel a presence, a vast, silent intelligence watching from the dark. The stones seem aware, almost alive, as if they were listening to the footsteps of those who now walk the same corridors their builders once did. What if these foundations are not simply remnants of construction, but remnants of communication, a bridge between worlds, physical, energetic, perhaps even interdimensional? If that is the case, then Tiwanaku was never just a city. It was an interface, a sacred engine designed to connect humanity with the cosmos, to maintain the dialogue between earth and sky. And perhaps that dialogue was interrupted. Many Andean myths speak of a great silence that fell after Viracocha departed, a time when the sky no longer answered, and mankind was left to wander without guidance. The subterranean chambers of Tiwanaku might be the tomb of that silence, the frozen remains of a technology once used to call down the gods. But as the modern world digs deeper, we may be disturbing more than stone. For within those buried corridors, there are signs of something sealed deliberately, as if to protect or to contain. Some claim to have seen markings unlike any known Andean script, etched in spirals that seem to shift when light touches them. Others report brief flickers of light within the tunnels, like distant stars winking through stone. Whatever sleeps beneath Tiwanaku may not be inert. It may be waiting. And if that ancient mechanism were ever to awaken again, what would it call back from the sky? The answer may lie in the scattered fragments of Puma Punku, where the precision of the impossible reaches its peak, the blueprint of the gods. Because there, amid shattered blocks and forgotten geometry, the gods may have left their blueprint, Puma Punku, the door of the Puma. Few names are more fitting, for to walk among its scattered stones is to stand before a threshold between worlds. The site lies less than a kilometer from Tiwanaku, yet it feels as if it belongs to another age entirely, an age of precision and purpose, so far beyond its time that even the most advanced civilizations of antiquity could scarcely have imagined it. The air here carries an eerie quiet, broken only by the sound of wind whispering across blocks the size of freight cars, cut from red sandstone and andesite with edges so exact that a single sheet of paper cannot fit between them. The famous H-blocks of Puma Punku are a marvel of geometry, each identical, each interlocking, and each machined with such mathematical perfection that they could have been designed on a computer, yet they predate modern technology by thousands of years. How then were they made? Archaeologists have long offered explanations ranging from copper chisels to stone hammers, yet none can reproduce the precision, symmetry, or polish seen here. The cuts are too clean, the surfaces too smooth, the tolerances too fine. Under magnification, the tool marks appear more like those produced by high-speed rotary instruments than by primitive tools. The corners are razor-sharp, the internal right angles flawless. Even today, with diamond-tipped drills, replicating such work would require laser guidance. So who or what taught the builders of Puma Punku to master stone as if it were metal or clay? To the Aymara people, the answer has always been clear. These stones were shaped by the gods themselves, or by those who walked with them. They tell of Viracochas' disciples, luminous beings who arrived from the heavens bearing rods that sang and glowed. They placed the stones with sound, not force, by commanding vibration to do their will. The ancient term cantati, meaning the shining ones, still echoes through Andean myth. They were said to know the music of creation, the hidden frequencies that bind matter and light. If such tales are symbolic, they point to a mastery of acoustics, resonance, and magnetism that modern science only now begins to understand. If they are literal, they may describe a technology that manipulated reality itself, a harmonic science once known to those who came from the stars. When sunlight strikes the surface of the andesite blocks, faint metallic reflections glimmer beneath the polish, as though traces of some unknown alloy remain fused within the stone. Geologists who have examined fragments under microscope report microscopic traces of silicate vitrification, meaning the rock was exposed to temperatures above 1200 degrees Celsius, conditions far beyond the capability of Bronze Age kilns. Something once melted these stones, not carved them, and yet their arrangement follows a pattern, one that suggests engineering, not chaos. The layout of Puma Punku's foundations mirrors constellations seen above the Altiplano during the precession of the equinoxes around 15,000 BCE. Some alignments correspond to Orion, others to the Pleiades, star clusters revered by ancient peoples across the planet. This astronomical fingerprint implies a single purpose: to replicate the heavens on Earth. Could Puma Punku have been more than a temple? Could it have been a blueprint of the cosmos, a physical map through which Viracochas' followers translated celestial laws into stone? The similarities between its layout and that of other megalithic sites around the world are striking. The interlocking blocks resemble the cyclopean masonry of Egypt's Osirian. The precision cuts echo the joints of Baalbek in Lebanon. The symmetry recalls the sacred architecture of Angkor and the mathematical design of Teotihuacan. Each appears to obey the same geometric principles, the same ratios, the same golden measurements, as if all were fragments of one original design handed down across continents and ages. If that is true, then Puma Punku was not built in isolation. It was part of a global language of stone, a silent testimony that humanity once shared a universal knowledge, perhaps inherited from those the Andean people called the Sky Teachers. Some researchers believe the entire platform of Puma Punku may have functioned as a resonant field, a kind of energy generator that converted vibrational frequency into power. When struck or sounded, the arrangement of blocks would have amplified certain tones, much like a massive tuning fork anchored in the earth. This could explain the ancient legends that describe the stones as light when the gods sang to them. To the ancients, song was not metaphor, it was physics. Others have noted that several blocks bear deep U-shaped channels and circular sockets that appear to have held metallic clamps, not for structural necessity, but but perhaps to conduct energy. These mysterious eye-shaped fittings, once made of a copper-arsenic-nickel alloy, were poured into carved grooves between stones. Their presence suggests a hybrid of architecture and technology, a union of mineral and metal that hints at an understanding of conductivity and electromagnetic flow. If this interpretation holds any truth, then Puma Punku was a machine, one designed to interact with both Earth and sky. Its purpose may have been to harmonize the planet's energy grid, to stabilize frequencies, or even to open gateways between realms. In this light, the name Door of the Puma takes on an entirely new meaning. In Andean symbolism, the puma represents the world of the living, the physical realm between the heavens above and the underworld below. To call this site a door may have been literal. Puma Punku could have been the threshold through which energy, beings, or knowledge passed from one plane to another. And if the builders truly stood beside the gods, then the stones we see today are not merely ruins. They are remnants of a language we no longer understand, written in matter instead of words. When night descends on the plateau and lightning flickers across the distant peaks, the massive blocks seem to awaken. The polished surfaces glint like mirrors catching the last fire of the sun. To those who stand among them, the sensation is unmistakable. A vibration in the bones, a faint hum beneath the soles of the feet, as though the ground itself remembers the frequency of creation. Perhaps that is the secret of Puma Punku. It is not just a monument to the gods, but of the gods, a tangible echo of their presence, a diagram of their mind rendered in stone. And if this blueprint truly encodes the mathematics of the heavens, then somewhere within its shattered perfection lies a message, one that the ancients may have understood and we have forgotten, a message that begins not with the question how, but why. Why did the gods build this? Why teach humanity the art of sacred construction, only to vanish? That mystery would drive generations of seekers, from Inca priests to modern explorers, to pursue the trail of Viracocha across mountains, deserts, and oceans. For the legend says that after completing the temples of stone, the sky beings did not vanish into myth. They left the Andes, and what followed their path may reveal the true scale of their influence across the entire ancient world. The path of the sky teachers. They left the Andes. That is what the oldest traditions insist, that once the sacred cities were complete, once humanity had been taught the laws of stone, star, and spirit, Viracocha and his luminous companions set forth across the world. Some walked west toward the sea, others turned north and east, vanishing into the jungles, the deserts, and the dawn. The people of the Andes wept as they departed, but the gods promised they would return when the stars aligned again. And so began the age of waiting and remembering. But perhaps they did not vanish at all. Perhaps they continued their work elsewhere. Across the ancient world, echoes of the same story appear, scattered like pieces of a broken mirror reflecting one radiant truth. In Central America, the Maya spoke of Kukulkan, the plumed serpent who descended from the sky to bring knowledge of the heavens and the calendar. The Aztecs called him Quetzalcoatl, the white-bearded teacher who forbade sacrifice and promised to return from the east. In both, we hear the unmistakable shadow of Viracocha, the luminous man from the stars, the bringer of civilization. Travel across the Pacific, and the pattern repeats. In Polynesia, oral histories tell of Oro, the shining god who descended on a rainbow and taught the art of navigation by the stars. In Easter Island, the colossal Moai face the horizon as if waiting for the return of their celestial ancestors, the Hotu Matua, the founders who came from the sea. And in ancient Mesopotamia, long before the rise of Sumer, the Babylonians wrote of Oannes, the amphibious teacher who emerged from the waters of the Persian Gulf to bring writing, mathematics, and law. Different names, different lands, yet the same story, the same pattern of descent, instruction, and departure. Is this mere coincidence, or are these cultures preserving the memory of one shared event, a global visitation that seeded civilization itself? In the sands of Egypt, we find another version. The priests of Heliopolis spoke of Ptah, the divine architect, who spoke the world into existence through sound, a phrase that recalls the Andean legends of the gods who shaped stone with vibration. The oldest Egyptian myth, the story of Zep-Tepi, the first time, describes how the gods descended from the stars, built the temples of the Nile, and then withdrew to the heavens, leaving behind only their sacred geometry. The pyramids, like the ruins of Tiwanaku, mirror the constellations above. The pattern holds. Even in the far-off mountains of China, legends tell of white-robed immortals descending from the sky on luminous chariots, teaching the art of agriculture and astronomy before disappearing into the clouds. Could it be that Viracocha and his companions were not isolated Andean deities, but part of a vast network of sky teachers who moved across the globe in an age so remote that history itself forgot? Modern archaeology tends to separate civilizations into isolated cradles of development: Sumer, Egypt, the Indus, the Yangtze, the Andes. But the similarities between their myths, architecture, and astronomy are too precise to dismiss. Each built pyramids or stepped platforms aligned to the stars. Each revered a sky-born teacher who arrived after a great flood. Each spoke of a time before time when humans and gods walked together. Perhaps these were not coincidences, but footprints, the path of a lost brotherhood of knowledge-bearers, traveling from one land to another, rekindling civilization wherever the memory of the flood had erased it. If this is true, then Viracocha was not merely a local god. He was a node in a global network of wisdom, one messenger of a cosmic lineage that has guided humanity since the dawn of consciousness. In the highlands of Peru, some elders still whisper of the Chulpa, ancient towers that predate the Incas, aligned with solstitial points and filled with strange magnetism. They say these were beacons, guiding the ships of the gods that sailed through the sky. And in the Nazca Desert, not far from where those towers stand, enormous lines stretch for miles, geometric designs visible only from the air, animals, spirals, runways. Who drew them and for whom? To some, they are offerings to the heavens. To others, they are coordinates, messages meant for those who once descended from the stars. If the sky teachers truly journeyed across the world, perhaps they left behind a trail of such markers, from the Nazca lines to the pyramids of Egypt, from the temples of Angkor to the standing stones of Britain. Each monument could be a point in a vast terrestrial constellation, forming a planetary map of contact. But the question remains, why did they leave? Ancient Andean lore tells that Viracocha foresaw a time when humanity would turn away from the harmony of creation, when greed and violence would return. Sorrowed by what he saw, he withdrew with his companions into the west, into the ocean, into the sky. Yet he promised to come back when the world was ready to remember. Perhaps the disappearance of the sky teachers was not abandonment, but necessity, a retreat into the stars, until humankind evolved enough to understand what had been given. And so, the myths endure, not as superstition, but as memory encoded in story, awaiting rediscovery. It is said that when the stars return to the same alignment that watched over Tiwanaku's birth, the door of the Puma will open once again, and the builders will walk among us. If such prophecies hold any truth, then humanity may not be waiting for the gods may be waiting for us to lift our gaze once more toward the heavens, to remember that we too are made of the same light. But to understand who these sky teachers truly were, we must go even deeper, beyond myth, beyond stone, into the evidence buried within the earth itself. Because somewhere beneath the dust of time lies the trace of their return, proof that the gods of the Andes may have left more than words and monuments. The faces in stone, they may have left their image. At first glance, the carvings that dot the ruins of Tiwanaku and the highlands of the Andes seem ordinary. Faces, symbols, fragments of gods half swallowed by the earth. But look closer, and the illusion of familiarity begins to fracture. The features that stare back from the stone are unlike any known Andean race. The proportions are alien. High, narrow foreheads, elongated skulls, deep, hollow eyes carved with almost mechanical precision. These are not depictions of ordinary humans. They are portraits of something else. The most haunting of these lies within the semi-subterranean temple of Tiwanaku. Set into its walls are more than 100 sculpted heads, each different from the next. Some are unmistakably human, with the rounded faces of ancient Andean peoples, but others defy all categorization. One bears the broad nose and heavy jaw of an African. Another carries the fine features of a European. Still another, narrow eyes and a flattened skull, resembling early depictions of the Asian steppe. But the most unsettling faces are those that fit no earthly mold. Elongated craniums, recessed eyes, lips too thin or absent, and cranial proportions that suggest something non-human. The Andean people called these faces the ancestors of all nations. But what if they were not ancestors at all? What if they were visitors? Ancient chroniclers noted the same strangeness. The Spanish priest Bernabé Cobo, writing in the 17th century, described Tiwanaku as the house of the first gods, whose forms were unlike any of the living. He confessed that the locals believed these faces depicted the original beings who came from the sky before the sun rose upon the world. To them, these were not idols. They were memories, frozen in stone. Among the most mysterious of these relics are the elongated skulls found throughout the region, particularly in Viracochas, just south of the Andes. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of them, each bearing cranial volumes up to 25% larger than the human norm, and with a single parietal plate instead of two. While some dismiss them as the result of deliberate cranial deformation, an ancient practice meant to imitate divine appearance, others point to genetic studies suggesting structural differences too great to be explained by binding alone. Were these the faces of the sky beings the Andean people tried to imitate? Were they trying to look like their gods? The practice of cranial elongation spans continents and epochs: Egypt, Sumer, the Maya, even the Pacific Islands. Everywhere the pattern repeats. Human beings reshaping themselves to resemble those who once descended from the heavens. Could this be the ultimate form of devotion or an act of remembrance? In Tiwanaku, certain statues stand as if frozen in motion, holding objects that resemble strange instruments. The most famous, known as the Bennett monolith, towers over 20 feet tall. Its carved hands grasp two artifacts, one described as a vessel, the other as a staff or device covered in geometric codes. Around its body spiral symbols of serpents, stars, and stepped patterns, the same motifs found across the world, from Egypt to Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. Scholars debate their meaning, but one truth is undeniable. These are not random decorations. They are a language, precise and mathematical, encoding relationships between earth, sky, and sound. And at the center of that language stands the human form, transformed, radiant, ascending. To the ancients, the gods were not distant. They were templates. Humanity was shaped in their image, and to remember that image was to remember its origin. The sculptures of Tiwanaku may not only depict the gods, they may describe humanity's intended design, a blueprint of physical and spiritual evolution. In the carvings around the gateway of the sun, we find the same motif. The radiant figure at the center, holding two staffs, surrounded by winged attendants. His eyes, wide and square, radiate lines of light, perhaps representing vision, energy, or knowledge. His face is not entirely human. It is serene, symmetrical, otherworldly. To the Aymara, this was Viracocha himself, the one who taught the laws of the heavens and the harmony of creation. Yet the question persists. Were these likenesses purely symbolic or literal memories of beings who once walked among men? In 2015, a group of archaeologists performing laser scans of Tiwanaku's statuary discovered that many of the carvings conform to golden ratio proportions with microscopic precision. Even more curious, some of the reliefs seem to encode three-dimensional geometry, suggesting the artists understood principles of perspective and optics unknown in their time. Such accuracy implies that the sculptors were either guided by advanced mathematical knowledge or by those who already possessed it. And so the theory grows. The faces in stone may not be idols of imagination, but documentation. The Andean builders may have been chroniclers of contact, capturing in rock what they saw in flesh. Their gods, with elongated skulls and luminous eyes, were not spirits of abstraction. They were visitors who came from the stars, and these sculptures are their portraits. Even the Inca, centuries later, honored these images as sacred relics. When asked why their ancestors worshipped white, bearded men from the sky, the Inca priests answered with reverence, "Because they are our teachers. They made us remember who we are." In the quiet of the subterranean temple, as wind sighs across the plateau, one can almost hear the echo of that remembering. Each face, each pair of hollow eyes seems to watch, as if waiting for recognition, as if asking humanity whether we still remember the hands that carved us into being. But the greatest secret of Tiwanaku's imagery is not in what the eyes can see, but in what the light reveals. Under ultraviolet scanning, researchers have found faint residues on the carvings, traces of pigments containing minerals not native to the region. Some of these compounds glow under certain frequencies, creating the eerie impression that the faces once shone in the dark, as if illuminated from within. Were the ancients trying to recreate the radiance of their celestial teachers? Or were they preserving an actual memory of beings whose skin emitted light, whose presence shimmered like the dawn? If the gods of the Andes truly bore such luminous form, then the legends of the Shining Ones may not be mere metaphor. They may describe the literal experience of encountering entities whose essence was light itself, beings who bridged the material and the divine. And if their faces still look out from the stones of Tiwanaku, perhaps they are not just relics of the past. Perhaps they are markers, reminders that the gods never truly left. They are still here, hidden in plain sight beneath the dust, behind the myths, waiting for humanity to see again what it once knew. Because when we recognize their faces, we may finally remember our own. But to understand why these gods looked as they did, and what their appearance truly meant, we must return to the heavens they called home, the celestial origin. For their likeness was not merely earthly, it was celestial. When night falls over the Andean plateau, the sky unfolds like an ancient manuscript written in light. The Milky Way cuts across the heavens as a river of fire, the Mayu, as the Quechua call it, the celestial reflection of the Urubamba River below. To the Andean people, this was not a random scattering of stars. It was the mirror of creation itself, the path of souls, the road of the gods. And somewhere along that glowing river, they believed, lay the home of Viracocha and his luminous companions. In their myths, the gods did not come from an abstract heaven. They descended from specific constellations, from the Pleiades, from Orion, from the dark nebulae known as the Celestial Llama. These clusters were more than stars. They were living beings, each carrying purpose, each connected to the cycles of life on Earth. When the Pleiades disappeared from the sky, the Andeans prepared for drought. When they returned, it was time for renewal. To them, the stars were teachers, and Viracocha was their voice. But what if this belief was not symbolic? What if it was memory, an echo of origin encoded in myth? Throughout the ancient world, from Egypt to Sumer to Mesoamerica, The same constellations appear in sacred architecture and myth. The pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt. The temples of Angkor mimic Draco. The Mayan observatories track the Pleiades. Tiwanaku and Puma Punku, too, share this celestial symmetry. Their primary axes point toward solstitial sunrises and the rising of the Pleiades, the same star cluster revered by farmers, kings, and astronomers across millennia. Why this global obsession with the same tiny group of stars? Modern astronomers note that the Pleiades, a cluster within the constellation Taurus, are among the nearest to Earth, only about 440 light-years away. They are young, radiant, and unusually prominent. For thousands of years, they have inspired stories of birth and descent. In Greek myth, they are the seven sisters, daughters of Atlas who fled to the heavens. In Japan, they are Subaru, the union of many into one. In the Andes, they are Kolka, the granary of the gods, the storehouse of souls. And in every story, one theme repeats. They came from the Pleiades. Could this persistent motif be humanity's oldest cosmic memory? If the sky beings of Viracocha were travelers, the Pleiades might have been their point of origin, or perhaps a symbolic gate, marking the path from another realm to ours. Ancient Andean astronomers depicted these stars not as points of light, but as circular portals, surrounded by spirals, the universal symbol of motion through space or time. Some petroglyphs near Lake Titicaca show spirals ending in figures descending from the sky, surrounded by rays. To the people who carved them, the stars were not distant suns. They were doors, and the gods, it seems, knew how to open them. Modern astrophysics offers tantalizing parallels. The region of the sky around the Pleiades is rich in interstellar dust, magnetic fields, and luminous nebulae, phenomena that distort space and light. To ancient eyes, this could easily appear as a gateway of fire. Even more curious, certain myths describe the sky beings traveling through rivers of light that connect stars like threads, an image astonishingly similar to what we now call cosmic filaments, the great web that binds the universe. Could ancient people have known, or been shown, the structure of the cosmos long before telescopes existed? Archaeoastronomers studying Tiwanaku's Kalasasaya temple discovered that its alignments match not only the sun and moon, but also specific star risings from over 15,000 years ago, a date that would place its construction near the end of the last ice age. At that time, Earth's climate was shifting, glaciers melting, sea levels rising. Civilizations could have vanished, leaving behind only stone and myth. Perhaps Viracocha and his companions were survivors of that earlier age, refugees of a global cataclysm, or travelers from another world who came to restore balance. The Andean legends speak of the white gods arriving after the Great Flood, the Unu Pachacuti, the water reversal of the world. They descended from the sky in luminous craft, shaped like discs or serpents of light, and landed upon the mountains that rose above the waters. These descriptions, written centuries before modern aviation, have uncanny detail: thunder that shook the sky, beams of fire, beings who walked on clouds. To the people of that age, such technology would appear divine. To us, it reads like the language of ancient contact. But perhaps we need not imagine ships or engines at all. Perhaps these beings did not travel through space. They appeared where needed, crossing the veil between frequencies of existence. If matter and energy are but vibrations on different scales, then a civilization capable of manipulating those frequencies could move between worlds as easily as thought. Could this be the true meaning of the luminous ones? That they were beings of higher vibration, light incarnate, able to shift between the physical and the ethereal? In the high Andes, the boundary between earth and sky has always been thin. Lightning dances across the peaks like veins of living fire. The ancient priests knew these mountains as apus, spirits of immense power, antennas of the gods. When Viracocha walked among them, the myths say, the mountains bowed before him. Some scholars interpret this as volcanic activity, but others see in it a hint of lost technology, perhaps the manipulation of electromagnetic fields, an understanding of how Earth itself could be tuned like an instrument. The celestial origin of the gods, then, may not point to one star or planet, but to an entire science, a knowledge of how the cosmos is structured and how consciousness moves through it. In that sense, coming from the Pleiades might mean more than physical travel. It might signify emergence from a higher plane, a realm where energy becomes matter through sound and intention, the very powers Viracocha was said to command. When the ancient priests looked to the heavens, they saw not strangers, but family. The stars were their ancestors, the living eyes of their creators. Each twinkling point above the mountains was a memory of home. And perhaps that is the true message encoded in the stones of Tiwanaku. Not that the gods came from there, but that we did too. That humanity itself is the offspring of a cosmic lineage, one that spans stars, dimensions, and ages. If so, the Andean myths are not tales of gods descending to earth, but of us remembering our descent from the sky. And yet, there is something more, something the ancients feared. For the stories of Viracocha's descent are always paired with those of his departure, and with prophecies that one day the heavens would open again, not in peace, but in reckoning. Because when the gods left, they did not close the door behind them. Some say it was left ajar, and through that opening, something else, something not of light, followed them down, the shadow of the serpent. Some say it was left ajar. When the gods of light withdrew to the heavens, they left behind a world illuminated, but fragile. Humanity, newly awakened, had been given the gifts of knowledge and order, yet without the guiding presence of its teachers, those gifts began to decay. The Andean legends speak of an age of balance that slowly unraveled, an age when the harmony between heaven and earth faltered, and into that silence something else entered. The people called it Amaru, the serpent of the deep. Unlike the feathered serpents of Mesoamerica, symbols of duality and renewal, Amaru was the embodiment of chaos, a being born from the waters below, from the same abyss that Viracocha had once tamed. When the creator departed, Amaru rose. The myths describe it as a vast, luminous serpent that slithered through the sky and dived into the lakes, its body made of fire and its eyes of obsidian. It brought storms, earthquakes, and floods. Wherever it passed, mountains split and stars fell. Some versions of the legend say that Amaru was once one of the sky beings, a guardian who turned against the laws of balance. Others call it a force of nature, awakened by the absence of its counterpart. Whatever its true nature, its arrival marked the beginning of the Pachacuti, the world turned upside down. The chronicles of Garcilaso de la Vega, the mestizo historian of the 16th century, recount how the Andean people remembered that dark age. The sun hid for many days, the rivers boiled, and men forgot the names of the stars. It was a time when the temples of Tiwanaku fell silent, when the stones that had once sung to the heavens cracked and lost their voice. The connection between earth and sky was severed. Perhaps this was more than myth. Geological evidence shows that around 12,000 years ago, precisely when Tiwanaku's earliest alignments would have been accurate, the Andean plateau suffered massive upheavals. Volcanic eruptions, glacial melts, and floods transformed the landscape. Lake Titicaca's level rose and fell violently, leaving terraces that still scar its shores. To those who survived, such devastation could only mean one thing: The gods had turned away, and darker powers had taken their place. In this new age, humanity tried to hold on to what remained of the sacred science. The priest-kings of Tiwanaku became keepers of fragments, bits of knowledge about geometry, sound, and light, but without the higher understanding that had once given them purpose. In time, even those fragments turned to superstition. Ritual replaced resonance. Sacrifice replaced harmony. The serpent of chaos had done its work, and yet, deep within the myth, something profound lingers. The Amaru was not merely destruction, it was transformation. Just as the serpent sheds its skin, this cosmic force tore apart an old world so that a new one could be born. The Andean worldview saw time as cyclical, each Pachacuti an inversion, a renewal. After every descent into darkness, the light would rise again. But before the dawn, there would always be a reckoning. The priests of later ages warned that the Amaru would return whenever mankind lost its balance, whenever the sacred order between heaven and earth was broken. In their rituals, they carved serpentine symbols into gold and stone, not to worship, but to remember. They said that the serpent waits beneath the mountains, coiled around the roots of the world, dreaming of the day when the sky will open once more. Curiously, this myth of the rebellious serpent appears far beyond the Andes. In Mesopotamia, it is Tiamat, the chaos dragon slain by Marduk to form the ordered world. In Egypt, it is Apep, the serpent of darkness who battles Ra each night beneath the horizon. In the Hebrew texts, it is Leviathan, the coiled beast of the deep. In every culture, the serpent represents both creation and destruction, the power that binds and breaks. Could it be that the ancients across the world remembered the same cataclysm, a cosmic war between forces of light and shadow that shaped the destiny of our planet? Perhaps Viracocha and the sky beings were not the only visitors. Perhaps others came, beings not of harmony, but of entropy. The duality of heaven itself may have been reflected on Earth, playing out through the rise and fall of civilizations. When archaeologists excavated beneath Puma Punku, they found layers of ash and vitrified stone, signs of sudden, intense heat. To conventional science, it suggests volcanic activity or an ancient explosion. But to the guardians of Andean lore, it marks the battle of the gods, when lightning fell from the sky and the temples burned, sealing away the knowledge of the first age. The legend says that Viracocha, before leaving, imprisoned the serpent beneath the earth, chaining it with rings of sound so it could not escape. The vibrations of Tiwanaku's stones, those humming frequencies that still echo through the ground, are said to be the remnants of that binding. The city itself became a seal, a resonant lock holding chaos at bay. And now, thousands of years later, as the world trembles once more with imbalance, the old ones say that the serpent stirs again. The quakes, the storms, the strange lights that flicker above the Andes, all are signs that the gate of the gods may be weakening. For every cycle of creation must end, and every door left ajar will one day open. In the Andean prophecies, this coming change is called the next Pachacuti, the Great Reversal. It is said that when the serpent rises once more, the sky beings will return, and the world will face a new dawn or a new destruction. And perhaps, hidden in the geometry of Tiwanaku, the ancient builders left us a warning, a way to recognize when that moment draws near. Because the stones of the Andes are not silent. They were built to speak to those who know how to listen, the code of the stones. And soon, it seems, they may begin to speak again. For the ancients did not write their prophecies in books or scrolls. They wrote them in stone, in the angles of light and shadow, in the resonance of sound and silence. To those who only see with the eyes, Tiwanaku is ruin. To those who listen with the soul, it is revelation. Each block, each alignment, each echo between temple walls forms part of a greater message, a language not spoken, but experienced. Modern researchers call it the Stone Code. It began with the rediscovery of patterns. In the 1990s, a team of archaeoastronomers led by Ivan Gezi noticed that the monuments of Tiwanaku and Puma Punku are not random or chaotic. Every structure, from the Gateway of the Sun to the Kalasasaya Temple, obeys a precise mathematical proportion. The golden ratio, 1.1.618, repeated over and over as though the builders sought to mirror the fractal heartbeat of nature itself. When plotted on a map, the site's main alignments form a perfect cross, oriented not to the magnetic poles but to celestial coordinates, the rising and setting points of the sun at the solstices, the Pleiades, and the galactic center. This geometry seems to synchronize the temple complex with both solar and stellar cycles, uniting the rhythms of earth and sky. But there was something stranger still. When these alignments were extended outward across the plateau, they connected with other ancient sites. The towers of Silistani to the north, the island shrines of the sun and moon on Lake Titicaca, and even the Nazca lines hundreds of miles away. Each stood upon the same geometric grid, as if part of a single design spanning continents. Some have called it the Andean Earth Matrix. Others, more daringly, the grid of the gods. What were these lines meant to do? To mark? To connect? Or to activate? To the Aymara priests, the answer is clear. They say the stones of Tiwanaku are alive, that they drink sunlight, that they sing to the stars, and that when the proper tone is struck, they awaken. This is no poetic metaphor. Acoustic studies have shown that the basalt and andesite blocks resonate at specific frequencies when struck, frequencies that correspond to the harmonic ratios found in the human body and the Earth's magnetic field. The builders, it seems, were tuning the planet itself. And what were they tuning it to? Hidden within the gateway of the sun, the central relief depicting Viracocha is surrounded by a band of glyphs, 48 winged figures in total, arranged in 3 tiers. For centuries, these symbols were thought to be decorative, but when the sequence is translated into binary values based on repetition and variation, a method first applied by Bolivian engineer Juan Mejia, it produces a numerical pattern identical to the Maya long-count calendar. The same mathematical rhythm, the same base 20 system, 2 civilizations, separated by vast distances, encoding the same cosmic clock. The implication is staggering. Tiwanaku may have functioned as a timekeeper, a celestial observatory measuring not just solar years, but the great cycles of the Earth, the precession of the equinoxes, a 25,020-year wobble of the planet's axis. And in that cycle lies the true message of the stones. For as the Earth tilts, the constellations that mark its equinoxes change. To the ancients, this shift was not abstract astronomy. It was the heartbeat of creation, the pulse of eras. Each precessional age marked the rise and fall of worlds, the descent and return of the gods. The current age, the age of the fish, the era of forgetting, is nearing its end. The next, according to the alignment encoded in the stones, will begin when the rising sun on the winter solstice aligns once more with the Pleiades and the galactic center, a moment that ancient Andean prophecy called the awakening of the fifth sun. That alignment is not distant. It began astronomically in our own era. In 2012, the world watched as the Mayan calendar reached its 0 point, marking the end of a great cycle. But few realized that Tiwanaku's geometry predicted the same event, not as destruction, but as transition. The temples were built to mark the turning of the heavens, to remind humanity of the last time the gods walked the earth, and the next time they will. The code of the stones is a message across time, a countdown inscribed in rock. And what it seems to say is this, that when the stars return to the positions they held during the first dawn, the door between worlds will open again. Puma Punku, the door of the Puma, may not be a metaphor at all. It may be a literal gate, a harmonic device that can reactivate when the proper celestial frequency is reached. The interlocking blocks, the metallic fittings, the resonance of the stone, all could form part of an ancient mechanism designed to channel the energy of the Earth's magnetic field at precise astronomical moments. If that sounds impossible, remember, we are only rediscovering what the ancients took for granted, that the universe itself is alive, and that architecture can be both art and instrument. To the builders of Tiwanaku, geometry was prayer. Every angle was intention, every proportion a hymn. They built not for the gods, but with them, embedding in their stones the memory of the heavens, and perhaps in doing so they left behind a promise. For if the stones of Tiwanaku and Puma Punku were truly tuned to the cosmic heartbeat, then as the earth enters a new alignment, as the fifth sun rises and the Pleiades return to their throne in the dawn, the temples may awaken once more. The old frequencies may return, the silence may break, the song of creation may echo again across the Altiplano. And if that happens, the door of the Puma will open. To what or to whom, no one can say. But the ancients called that moment the return of Viracocha, and they warned that it would not be the end of the world, but the end of forgetfulness. Because when the stones begin to sing again, humanity will remember what it truly is, not a species born of earth and chance, but of stars and purpose. And in that remembering, the gods of the Andes will walk once more. The return of Viracocha, the end of forgetfulness. That is how the elders describe it. Not apocalypse, not destruction, but remembering. The moment when the heavens realign and the old frequencies stir once more within the bones of the earth. When that happens, they say, Viracocha will return, not as a conqueror, but as a revealer, to awaken humanity to what it has always been. In the high villages of the Altiplano, where the wind moves like spirit through thin air, this prophecy is still spoken in whispers. The Quechua and Aymara call the coming era the Pachacuti, the world turned over. It marks the renewal of all things, the reversal of imbalance, the restoration of harmony between heaven and man. To the modern ear, it sounds like a legend. To those who watch the sky, it is a clock already ticking, because the heavens have begun to change again. Astronomers confirm what ancient priests once observed through stone and shadow. The solstices and equinoxes are shifting. The sun rises each year closer to the line that connects the Pleiades with the galactic center. The same configuration that, according to the geometry of Tiwanaku, signaled the dawn of the first age. To the ancients, this was the moment of return, when the cosmic door opens and the breath of the gods moves through creation again. And it is happening now. In December of 2020, a rare alignment between Jupiter and Saturn, known as the Great Conjunction, filled the night sky with a brilliant double star visible across the Andes. To Western astronomers, it was coincidence. To the descendants of the Tiwanaku priests, it was the first note in the Song of Awakening. The celestial teachers were stirring, and the old rhythm was returning. Yet as always, light and shadow arrive together. Earthquakes rumble through the mountains, storms grow fiercer, the seasons falter. The old prophecies warned that when the Pachacuti begins, the earth itself will cleanse, not as punishment, but as correction. The serpent of chaos and the god of creation are not enemies. They are dancers, their movements shaping the cycles of renewal. To the Inca and their ancestors, Viracocha was both creator and destroyer, the one who brings the flood and the one who ends it. When he comes, the world is remade. Mountains rise, rivers change course, the sky itself is reordered, and through the chaos, humanity is invited to ascend, not physically but in consciousness. Perhaps that is why his return is not to be feared. In the chronicles of the 17th century, a Jesuit missionary named Molina recorded an astonishing prophecy spoken by an aged Aymara priest near Lake Titicaca. When the time of the fifth sun comes, the white god shall walk again upon the earth. He shall come from the east as before, but he shall not come alone. His voice will be heard in the wind, and the stones shall speak his name. The priest died before explaining what the stones speaking meant. Yet today, scientists at the ruins of Tiwanaku have begun to detect faint infrasound resonances emanating from beneath the site. Tones inaudible to human ears, pulsing in rhythmic intervals, as though the earth itself were humming. It could be seismic activity, or it could be something older, the whisper of the very mechanism the myths describe. And if the stones truly are awakening, what message might they carry? Perhaps the return of Viracocha is not a physical descent from the sky, but an unveiling of memory, the reactivation of the ancient connection between human consciousness and the cosmic field. When the ancients said that the gods taught humanity to see as they see, they may have meant that the gift was awareness itself, the ability to perceive the divine pattern in all things. If so, then Viracocha's return would be an inner event as much as an outer one, the reawakening of that vision within the collective mind of humankind. Even now, strange synchronicities seem to unfold around the world. Symbols long buried in myth reappear in crop formations, in dreams, in art. Magnetic anomalies pulse in the Andes, the Himalayas, and other ancient power centers, as though the Earth is calling its guardians back to their stations. Solar storms intensify, filling the magnetosphere with waves of radiation that science can measure but not fully explain. And in those frequencies, the old rhythm hides, the pulse of creation itself, waiting to be heard again. If Tiwanaku and Puma Punku are indeed instruments, their song may soon be audible once more. When the Earth's resonance, the Schumann frequency, peaks during solar storms, the Andean plateau responds with subtle vibrations, measurable by seismographs. The ancients may have known this cycle intimately. The temples, perfectly aligned with the sun and stars, could act as amplifiers of that energy. Imagine the moment when all the alignments synchronize again. The sun rising between the gateways, the Pleiades burning above the lake, the Earth's frequency humming at its natural peak, the stones resonating with the same vibration that shaped them. Would that not be the voice of Viracocha returning? The prophecy says he will come not as one, but as many. Perhaps that means he will not descend as a figure of light in the sky, but awaken through us, through a global remembrance of the unity between humanity and the cosmos. The age of priests and intermediaries will end. The age of direct communion will begin. And when that happens, the myths say, the serpent will no longer be feared. It will coil around the world not to devour, but to protect, its body forming a circle, the ancient symbol of eternity. Light and shadow, creator and destroyer, harmonized again. The fifth sun will rise, the heavens will open, the forgotten science of the gods will return through human hands, not as thunder or flame, but as wisdom reborn. In that dawn, Tiwanaku will no longer be ruin. It will awaken as what it was always meant to be, a beacon between worlds, a bridge of memory stretching from the human heart to the stars. For Viracocha never truly left. He sleeps within us, waiting for the moment when we finally look up. And remember that the light we seek in the heavens has been shining inside us all along. But before that light can rise fully, the world must pass through its night. For every rebirth demands surrender. Every awakening begins with darkness. And deep beneath the Andes, where the sealed chambers of Tiwanaku still hum in silence, something ancient is stirring once again, a heartbeat within stone, counting down to the return of the dawn. The night before the dawn. Before every dawn, there is silence and shadow. The Andean elders say that when the fifth sun draws near, the world will first pass through its long night. It will seem as though the gods have turned their faces away once more, that chaos reigns unchecked. But this, they remind us, is illusion. For the deepest darkness is not punishment, it is preparation. They call this age Wanyui Pacha, the time of death. not the death of the body, but of illusion, the unraveling of falsehoods woven through centuries of forgetting. It is said that the earth must tremble, the waters must rise, and the sky must burn with light before humanity remembers what it has lost. Look around, and it is hard not to see the signs. Across the globe, the planet groans beneath the weight of imbalance. The polar ice melts faster than the old ones thought possible. Storms strike in patterns that mirror ancient warnings. When the mountains wear white no more and the sea climbs the land, the serpent begins to stir. The prophecy feels uncomfortably near, but perhaps the true shaking is not geological, it is spiritual. Humanity, for all its technology, has never felt so divided, so restless, so unsure of its own reflection. We search the heavens for meaning, yet the silence grows louder. And in that silence, the voice of the old world begins to echo once more, through the stones, through the stars, through us. There is a pattern to this chaos. In the Andean calendar, each cosmic age, each Pachacuti, ends in purification. Fire, water, wind, and time itself become agents of transformation. The last great reversal, they say, came with the flood, the Unu Pachacuti. The next will come with the Ilapa Pachacuti, the age of lightning and revelation. In this time, light will fall from the heavens not as destruction, but as knowledge. The thunder will speak in a language of electricity, and those who listen with the heart will understand. Even now, strange phenomena ripple across the skies. Pulses of plasma sweep through the magnetosphere, visible as auroras in latitudes where they do not belong. Instruments record sounds below the threshold of hearing, the Earth's own song rising in frequency. Scientists call them microseisms. The ancients would have called them omens. And in the heart of the Andes, the resonance of Tiwanaku has begun to shift. Recent measurements taken by geological sensors reveal that the plateau vibrates faintly at 7.83 Hz, the exact same frequency as the Schumann resonance, the Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat. This synchronization is no coincidence. The same pattern appears near other ancient sites across the world, Giza, Angkor, and Stonehenge, as though all the sacred centers of the planet are tuning themselves to one shared rhythm. Could the Earth itself be preparing for the return? The Andean priests teach that before the fifth sun rises, the mirror between worlds must clear. Humanity must confront the reflection it has avoided, its shadow. The serpent, they say, is not evil. It is truth, coiled and waiting. When its eyes open, it shows each person what they truly are. Only those who face themselves without fear will cross the threshold of the new age. Perhaps that is what we are witnessing now, a global confrontation with our own creation, our technology, our wars, our divisions. The gods will not return to save us. They will return to see if we have learned to save ourselves. And yet, amidst this turmoil, signs of awakening flicker everywhere. Across the world, sacred sites long forgotten are being rediscovered. Hidden temples emerge from jungles, stone cities from sand. Symbols once dismissed as mythic decoration are revealed as star maps, cosmic blueprints, fragments of a universal language. Humanity, unknowingly, is piecing together the memory it lost. In the Andes, descendants of the Amautas, the ancient keepers of wisdom, gather again at Lake Titicaca on the solstices. They light fires, chant the old hymns, and offer corn to the dawn. They say the lake is stirring, that at night ripples appear with no wind, and faint glows move beneath the surface, as if something luminous is waking below. Perhaps it is the reflection of the stars. Perhaps it is something more. For the lake, according to legend, is where Viracocha first rose, and where he will rise again. The elders say that when the fifth sun is born, the waters of Titicaca will glow like molten gold. A light will emerge from the depths, and the mountain peaks will echo with a sound no ear has heard since the first age, the hum of creation itself. Those who stand upon the shore will feel it in their bones. The stones of Tiwanaku will vibrate, and the gateways will shimmer as if made of water. That is when the door of the Puma will open. The prophecy does not describe an invasion, but a revelation, a meeting of dimensions, where the light of the cosmos touches the heart of humanity once more. The return of the gods may not be figures descending from the sky, but frequencies awakening within the human spirit, reconnecting us with the living universe. Still, before the dawn, fear will spread. The unready will see only destruction. The wise will see transformation. For to the caterpillar, the cocoon is death, but to the butterfly, it is birth. The Andean shamans say that those who remember their lineage to the stars will guide the rest. They will speak not through temples or institutions, but through resonance, through compassion, through vision, through the rediscovery of harmony with the earth. The gods will not choose them. They will recognize themselves as the gods they have always been. The night before the dawn will test humanity's memory, courage, and unity. But when the first light rises, when the fifth sun spills over the Andes, the sky will not hold a single god, but countless reflections of one truth, that we have never been separate from the heavens, that the return of Viracocha is not arrival, but remembrance. And when the first rays touch Tiwanaku once more, the stones will answer, with the same hum that shaped them at the beginning of time. But before that sound can rise, one final key must be turned, one mystery left unsolved, hidden deep within the gate of the sun itself, because there, the ancients carved more than art. They carved the code that may unlock the door between worlds, and what lies beyond that door may change not just history, but the future of humankind. The gate of the sun. It stands alone on the plateau, silent, unbroken, and eternal. The gateway of the sun rises like a sentry between worlds, hewn from a single block of andesite weighing 10 tons. For over 1,000 years, it has endured frost, quake, and time itself, its face turned toward the path of the rising sun. To the modern visitor, it appears motionless. But to those who understand the rhythm of the cosmos, it is alive. At dawn, when the first light strikes its lintel, the gate seems to breathe, shadows and radiance sliding across its carvings in precise choreography. The figures glow, their patterns aligning with the solar rays at specific moments of the year. To the ancients, this was no coincidence. It was communion. At its center stands the Radiant One, Viracocha, the Lord of Light, eyes wide and mouth open in eternal proclamation. From his head blaze 16 rays, 8 straight and 8 ending in circles, symbolizing the dual nature of creation, spirit and matter, energy and form. In his hands he holds 2 staffs, often called thunderbolts, but their shapes are intricate, geometric, like instruments or keys. Around him march 48 winged beings, their expressions calm and deliberate. Some bear human faces, others the heads of condors, eagles, or felines. Each one looks toward the central god, as though receiving his command. Beneath them run bands of symbols, stepped patterns, suns, serpents, and tears. To the priests of Tiwanaku, every line was sacred. To us, they are the remnants of a language whose grammar is geometry and whose message spans millennia. For the gate of the sun is not merely an entrance, it is an equation. When modern researchers began to map the arrangement of its glyphs, they discovered ratios and alignments that correspond with celestial cycles, not only the solar year, but lunar months, eclipses, and the 11-year rhythm of the sunspot cycle. The ancient engineers of Tiwanaku had built a stone computer, a device capable of tracking the pulse of the heavens. But even that explanation feels too small. When high-frequency light and laser scanning were applied to the gate, faint inscriptions invisible to the naked eye appeared. Concentric circles and spirals hidden beneath the surface, etched with precision at depths of less than a millimeter. These spirals, when plotted and overlaid on the star field above Lake Titicaca at the time of Tiwanaku's construction, form a map. The Pleiades, Orion, Sirius, and the Galactic Center, all connected by lines of alignment. It is as though the monument is not pointing to the heavens, but mirroring them, as if the gate itself is a projection of the cosmos in stone. And within this cosmic map lies an enigma, the central tear falling from Viracocha's right eye. Scholars once saw it as a symbol of compassion, the god's sorrow for the suffering of humanity. But according to Andean legend, that tear marks the path of descent, the channel through which divine essence enters the world. In that single symbol, myth and geometry unite. The tear aligns exactly with the ecliptic, the path of the sun, at the moment of the June solstice. When the first light of the solstice passes through the gate, it touches that carved tear and casts a line of fire directly across the temple floor, leading toward a buried chamber beneath the kalasasaya. The old priests called it Inti Punku, the door within the door. Some say that chamber still exists, sealed long ago, containing what the myths describe as the heart of Viracocha. What could it be? A relic? A device? A resonance chamber? Legends tell that when the gods left the world, they sealed their knowledge in the gate and locked it with sound. Only when the song of the earth harmonizes with the song of the sky will the portal awaken again. The vibrations recorded recently at Tiwanaku, the 783 Hz heartbeat of the planet, may be the first faint stirrings of that resonance. If the alignment of the fifth sun completes and the frequency rises, the gate of the sun could once again serve its ancient function, not as a physical door, but as a trans-dimensional interface, where matter and energy, past and future, human and divine, converge. To stand before the gate is to feel this potential. The air hums faintly. The stone radiates a strange warmth even in the cold dawn. Pilgrims often describe hearing a low tone, like the vibration of distant thunder, emanating from the lintel when sunlight hits its carvings at certain angles. Instruments register nothing, yet those who listen with their bodies feel it clearly. Perhaps this is what the ancients meant by the voice of the gods. If so, the message is not bound to language. It is a vibration that speaks directly to the human spirit, awakening memory older than civilization itself. The moment one stands beneath that gate, there is an undeniable sense of being watched, not in menace, but in recognition, as if the monument remembers every eye that has gazed upon it. And the question rises unbidden: what happens when that recognition becomes mutual? When humanity once again sees the gate of the sun not as ruin, but as mirror? In that instant, the legend says, the portal will open, not outward, but inward, revealing that the true door of the gods was never carved in stone at all. It was carved in consciousness. The Andean prophecy calls this the turning of the mirror, the moment when humankind realizes that the divine realm it seeks in the sky has always resided within its own soul. The gate does not lead elsewhere. It leads back to the source, back to the memory of origin. But before that awakening can occur, one more secret of the gate must be revealed, a secret not of light, but of sound. For the ancients did not build with silence, they built with frequency. And the key that unlocks the gate of the sun may not be hidden beneath its carvings, but within its tone, a vibration waiting to be sung once more. The sound of creation. They said the gods sang the world into being. It was not metaphor, it was memory. Long before mankind learned to carve symbols into clay, before the first words were spoken, the universe itself vibrated with sound, the primal resonance from which all matter unfolded. The ancients knew this not as theory, but as experience. To them, sound was not merely heard, it was felt, the invisible architect shaping reality from within. At Tiwanaku and Puma Punku, this knowledge was carved into stone. For centuries, scholars have marveled at the impossible precision of the megaliths, their right angles, their mirror-polished surfaces, yet few have asked the simplest question: why do these stones sing? When struck, even lightly, the andesite blocks emit tones of haunting clarity, harmonics so pure they can interfere with one another to create standing waves in the air. The ancients called this resonance Aru, the voice of the earth. Legend says that Viracocha himself taught the builders to harness this voice. He taught them to move mountains not by brute force, but by harmony. The temples of Tiwanaku were not only places of worship, they were instruments, tuned to the frequency of creation itself. When archaeologists measured the dimensions of the Kalasasaya temple, they discovered that its inner courtyard forms a near-perfect acoustic chamber. A whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other, even against the howling wind of the Altiplano. The effect is so precise that the temple could amplify sound waves at specific frequencies: 110 Hz, 220 Hz, 440 Hz, the same harmonics that govern the human vocal range and the natural resonance of the earth. Coincidence or code? In the Andean tradition, sacred songs known as haile were used to speak to the stones. Priests would chant for hours, their voices rising and falling in measured rhythm. The goal was not prayer, but activation, aligning their frequency with that of the earth beneath their feet. When the resonance matched, the ancients said, the stones became weightless. Modern physics has begun to rediscover fragments of this forgotten art. The phenomenon of acoustic levitation, using standing sound waves to suspend objects in midair, is no longer myth. In laboratories, tiny spheres of water and metal now float in invisible currents of vibration. Scientists call it resonant frequency manipulation. The ancients might have called it magic. Could it be that the builders of Tiwanaku understood this principle on a scale we have yet to grasp? The Andean word for creation, kuichi, also means vibration or rainbow. To the priests of Viracocha, light and sound were two expressions of the same divine substance. They spoke of singing light, tones so pure they became color, color so bright it became sound. In their cosmology, the gods wove reality as a song of luminous vibration, every mountain and river a note in an infinite symphony. The ruins seem to confirm this worldview. The famous H-blocks of Puma Punku, with their flawless symmetry, are not only mathematical marvels, they are acoustic amplifiers. When sound waves travel through them, the air inside their channels vibrates in harmonic ratios corresponding to musical intervals: the octave, the fifth, the third. Each block is, in effect, a resonant chamber, a tuning fork in stone. When the wind passes through the ruins at certain speeds, the entire complex hums softly, as if the gods are still whispering through their architecture. Perhaps the ancients were not building monuments at all. They were constructing instruments, vast resonant devices that could channel sound, energy, and intention. Across the world, we find echoes of the same secret. The Great Pyramid of Egypt resonates at 432 Hz, the same frequency used in Tibetan singing bowls and Andean flutes. The temples of Angkor Wat amplify sound in geometric patterns identical to those found in Tiwanaku. Even the stone circles of Britain produce tones at the same harmonic intervals. It is as if a single civilization, older than recorded history, left behind a global symphony written in megaliths. At the heart of that symphony stands the sound of creation, the tone that bridges heaven and earth. Ancient texts describe it as a hum, a vibration that awakens matter. The Aymara call it Taki Viracocha, the song of the Shining One. According to legend, when Viracocha created life, he did not shape it with his hands. He sang it into existence. His voice was not air, but energy, resonating through the void. Each note became a world, each rhythm a cycle of time. And when he departed, he left the tone embedded within the earth, a seed waiting for those who could hear it again. Perhaps that tone is what scientists now call the Schumann resonance. Perhaps it is something deeper, a fundamental vibration of consciousness itself. When a person stands within Tiwanaku's temple at sunrise, a strange phenomenon occurs. The sound of the wind aligns with the human heartbeat. Visitors often describe entering a trance-like state, as if the sight amplifies awareness itself. The old priests said this was the purpose of their architecture, to awaken the divine frequency within the soul. The temple was a tuning chamber, and humanity, the instrument. If this is true, then the sound of creation is not an external force. It is within us, the same vibration that animates the stars, the same hum that breathes through every atom of existence. Viracocha's final gift was not technology, but remembrance. the knowledge that sound, intention, and consciousness are one. And so the legend of the singing stones may not describe machines, but a state of being, a world where humanity once lived in harmony with the frequencies of creation, and the gods were simply those who remembered how to sing the song. The Gate of the Sun, then, is more than an entrance. It is an invitation to listen, because when the right tone is struck, when the voice of the earth and the voice of the human heart align, the door between worlds opens not in stone, but in the soul. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant by enlightenment, to remember the frequency of one's own origin. And if the fifth sun is indeed rising, its first sound will not be thunder. It will be a tone. The same tone that birthed the stars, the same hum that once filled the temples of Tiwanaku, the sound of creation. And somewhere, deep beneath the Andes, that sound is stirring again, faint, patient, eternal, waiting for humanity to remember the harmony it lost. But there is one more secret the ancients left us, the final key to this forgotten science. For if sound shaped the world, then light was its reflection, and together they form the true language of the gods, the language of light. They said the gods spoke in light, not in words nor in sound, but in radiant symbols that shone like living fire, a communication of color and form that required no translation. Those who saw it did not hear a voice. They remembered one. The light spoke directly to the soul, bypassing the ear and entering through the heart. The Andean priests called this ancient form of speech Ilari, meaning dawn, or the luminous utterance. They believed that before the ages of darkness, before the flood, before forgetfulness, the world itself spoke in this luminous tongue. Every ray of sunlight carried meaning. Every spark in the night sky was a syllable of creation. When Viracocha walked the earth, legend says his body glowed with this language. He did not command. He radiated. Every gesture, every glance was message and energy entwined. Those who beheld him described not a man, but a field of living light, pulsing in rhythm with the sun. In his presence, matter itself responded. Stone softened, seeds sprouted, hearts awakened. To the ancients, this was not mythic exaggeration. It was the essence of divine reality. Light was the word of God. Sound was its breath. Together they formed the logos of the Andes, the twin forces through which existence continually renews itself. At Tiwanaku, the stones bear traces of this luminous language. Under the first light of morning, their surfaces glow with hues that shift like liquid, red to gold, gold to silver. Microscopic crystals within the andesite reflect light in patterns that mimic the arrangement of the carvings. It is as if the rock itself has memory, as though it once absorbed a great radiance and still carries its echo. The priests believed that light could think. They called it Yachai Ila, intelligent fire. According to their cosmology, consciousness was not limited to beings. It was the fabric of light itself. Stars were minds, planets were dreams, and humanity was the prism through which divine light learned to see itself. To speak in light, then, was to remember unity, to dissolve the illusion of separation. Perhaps this is why every Andean temple was built to catch and guide the sun. The alignments, the mirrors of polished stone, the corridors that channeled beams of light at dawn, all were part of a grand design, a luminous syntax. When the first ray entered the chamber and struck the sacred idol, the entire space would come alive in color. The priests called this moment Inti Rixi, the seeing of the sun. To them, the flash of light was not spectacle, it was revelation. It was the voice of the cosmos, manifest. And maybe, just maybe, this was the same voice that the ancients of Egypt called the Eye of Ra, the same radiance the Vedic seers named Jyoti, the same divine fire that the prophets of every age described in their visions. Everywhere, across all lands, the same story repeats. The gods of light descended, not to rule, but to remind that we are made of the same brilliance that burns in the stars. If the sound of creation was the first breath, then the language of light was the first thought. Some claim this is mere poetry, but light itself behaves as message. Physics now tells us that photons are both particles and waves, carriers of information that permeate every atom of the universe. When we look at the stars, we are literally receiving their stories, written in beams that have traveled across millennia. Each glimmer is a fragment of the cosmic word, a sentence spoken before time. Could it be that the ancients somehow felt this truth, that to them, light was not passive illumination, but living intelligence? They believed that when two beams of light intersect, consciousness is born. The crossing of rays, the meeting of reflections, mirrors the union of souls. This is why the temples of Tiwanaku were constructed not merely as solar observatories, but as places where light could converge, where heaven and earth could meet in brilliance. At the heart of this convergence stood the golden disk of the sun, once housed in the temple of Viracocha at Tiwanaku. Chroniclers describe it as a perfect circle of radiant metal, glowing with its own inner fire. It was said to capture the rays of dawn and project them through the temple's corridors, filling the air with shimmering patterns that danced like living symbols. The priests read these patterns as scripture, the literal light writing of the divine. The disk was lost after the Spanish conquest, hidden, according to rumor, beneath Lake Titicaca, guarded by the waters that first gave birth to the gods. But some whisper that its image lives on, not as artifact, but as memory embedded within the stone itself. For even in absence, the gate of the sun still radiates, as if that disk were behind it, unseen yet present, casting invisible rays through the ages. Light and sound, word and breath, heaven and earth. They are not opposites, but harmonies. When vibration becomes visible, sound turns to light. When light slows and condenses, it becomes matter. The ancients saw this as proof that everything in existence is a continuum, a single song shifting through octaves of frequency. To them, enlightenment was literal, to become filled with light, to vibrate once more in tune with the cosmos. Perhaps that is what the return of Viracocha truly means. Not the descent of a deity, but the reawakening of this inner radiance. The moment when humanity remembers how to speak in the language of light. We are surrounded by it. It flows through every heartbeat, every breath, every thought. Each emotion, each act of kindness, each spark of creativity, all are forms of that luminous dialogue. The gods are not gone. They are conversing with us in photons and waves, in intuition and dream. We need only learn to listen, to see. When the fifth sun fully rises, the myths say the earth itself will glow, not with fire, but with consciousness. The mountains will shine, the oceans will mirror the heavens, and every living being will become a syllable in the divine sentence of creation. Humanity will no longer pray to the stars, it will speak with them. The temples of Tiwanaku will then fulfill their destiny. No longer ruins, but receivers, their stones vibrating with light as they once did in the first age. And those who stand within their gates will feel it, the pulse of the cosmos flowing through the veins of the world. In that moment, the language of light will return, and with it, the understanding that to illuminate is to love, because light is not the opposite of darkness. It is its completion, the union of all that is seen and unseen. And when that union is remembered, the gods of the Andes will speak again, not from the sky, but from within the heart of every human being. For we are all fragments of their light, learning once more to sing their song. But before the final awakening, there remains one last mystery, the fate of the lost disk and the temple it once illuminated. For deep beneath the waters of Lake Titicaca, hidden in cold silence, lies what may be the most sacred relic of all, the heart of Viracocha himself. And to find it, we must descend into the depths, where light and darkness merge, and the story of creation begins again. The heart beneath the lake. They say that beneath Lake Titicaca, The first light still sleeps. From the shore, the lake looks peaceful, a mirror of cobalt and silver lying between two nations, the highest navigable sea on Earth. But when the wind stills and the surface turns to glass, something stirs below, a faint glow, a pulse, as if the planet itself were breathing. The locals call it Kori Inti, the golden sun, the heart that once burned in the temple of Viracocha and then returned to the womb of the world. According to the oldest hymns, after the age of chaos, the Creator looked upon the broken earth and wept. His tears became the waters of the lake, and in their depths he hid the essence of life, a sphere of living light, the seed of every future dawn. When the children of the stars forget who they are, he said, the lake will remember for them. Modern divers who have descended into Titicaca's cold depths describe an eerie calm. Visibility fades into blue haze. Sound dies. Then the forms appear, rectangles of stone, terraces, stairways, a wall that seems to run endlessly beneath the mud. In 2000, an international expedition mapped part of this submerged complex. What they found astonished even the skeptics. A temple built of massive blocks, aligned with the same geometry as Tiwanaku above. Radiocarbon samples from artifacts nearby suggested an age far older than the Inca, older even than the last ice age. The scientists called it coincidence. The locals called it the House of the Heart. They believe it is here that Viracocha's light descended after he vanished across the sea. The temple is said to contain a chamber of crystal, a vault where the energy of creation still hums in silence. The old fishermen swear that on certain nights, especially when the Pleiades blaze directly overhead, the water above the site glows faintly, and fish flee the radiance. Some claim to hear music through the hulls of their boats, a distant tone like a bell rung underwater. To the Aymara, these are not legends but reminders. They say the lake is alive, and its spirit, Mama Cocha, guards the sleeping sun until humanity is ready to bear its brilliance again. Her breath rises as mist at dawn. Her voice rolls in thunder. If she stirs too violently, the mountains quake. But when she dreams gently, the surface shines with a warmth that no altitude should allow. The myths tell of pilgrims who once journeyed to the lake seeking the illumination of remembrance. They would fast, enter the water, and disappear beneath the surface for days. Those who returned spoke of cities of light below, of halls lined with mirrors that reflected not their faces, but their souls. The water showed me who I am, one ancient hymn says. It spoke in images of fire. Perhaps these stories preserve the memory of initiations, rituals in which sound and light combined to dissolve the boundary between the physical and the divine. The lake, reflecting the heavens, became the axis between worlds, its depths, the doorway through which the gods once entered the earth. Every culture that touched these waters inherited the same reverence. The Inca traced their royal lineage to a golden couple who rose from the lake carrying a staff of light. The Spanish chroniclers heard it again and again. The empire began where the sun was born from the water. To them it was myth. To the Andean priests it was fact disguised as poetry. When modern sonar scans revealed geometric patterns on the lake bed, circles, lines, and what appeared to be a spiral corridor leading toward the central ruin, the parallels to the gateway of the sun were undeniable. It was as if the design of Tiwanaku continued below the surface, completing a pattern only visible from above, a temple half in air, half in water, the union of heaven and abyss. If this was intentional, it means the builders understood something profound, that creation arises where opposites meet, that life begins at the confluence of light and shadow. The heart of Viracocha was not hidden out of fear. It was returned to the place where all beginnings sleep, the womb of the earth, awaiting rebirth. And perhaps that rebirth is near, for the same tremors that shake the Andes today ripple through the depths of Titicaca. Bubbles rise where none did before. Magnetic readings shift unpredictably. Researchers call it geothermal activity. The priests of the lake call it the stirring of the heart. They say when the world is ready, when humanity rediscovers the harmony of sound and light, the waters will part and the temple will rise, not by miracle but by resonance. The vibration of the new age will draw the luminous heart upward, reuniting heaven and earth once more. Maybe this is what the ancients meant by the awakening of the fifth sun. Not a cosmic catastrophe, but the resurfacing of what was hidden, the return of the inner light to the surface of human awareness. If we could stand on the shore in that moment, we might see the water glow gold as dawn ignites across the snow peaks. The hum beneath the earth would swell into a note that every heart recognizes, even if no instrument could record it. The gate of the sun would blaze, and every stone of Tiwanaku would shimmer as though transparent. For the heart beneath the lake and the heart within the human breast are one. Viracocha did not leave his essence in the depths for us to worship. It was left there so that when we finally seek it, we must descend into our own waters, through our own shadows, to retrieve it. Only by diving into the darkness can we lift the light again, and that is the true initiation. The ancients called it the return of the heart. When the waters rise with fire, when the sky sings, and when mankind remembers that it was never separate from the gods. But before that ascent, there remains one final journey, the path that leads beyond even the lake, to the secret the heavens themselves still guard. For the Andean priests spoke of a place where the stars touched the earth directly, a mountain that shone like crystal under the new sun. They called it Acapana, the summit of resurrection, and there, they said, the gods will stand once more. The mountain of resurrection. They called it Acapana, the summit of resurrection, and there, they said, the gods will stand once more. From a distance, Acapana looks like a natural hill rising out of the Altiplano's blue-brown vastness, a weathered mound pocked by centuries of looting. But step closer, and the illusion dissolves. The hill resolves into edges and plains, into terraces and angles that do not belong to wind or rain. You begin to see the mountain for what it is, a seven-tiered, stepped pyramid engineered with a precision that turns dust into geometry. Acapana is not a hill. It is a decision. It is the choice to raise a mountain by hand and then teach it to speak the language of water, star, and stone. Archaeologists who have wrestled with its flanks describe a structure unlike any other in the Andean world. Its core is earth, but its skin was once sheathed in andesite and sandstone revetments, great facing blocks fitted with the same impossibly fine tolerances seen at Puma Punku. Some of those blocks still cling to the tiers like armor, others lie tumbled at the base, casualties of time and quarrying. Yet the plan remains legible. Each platform steps inward with deliberate rhythm, drawing the eye to a flat summit where a sunken court once mirrored the sky. It is the plumbing, however, that steals the breath. Beneath the terraces runs a concealed lattice of stone conduits, bevel-cut channels, and right-angled shafts, a hydraulic nervous system so elaborate that no one disputes its intentionality. Seasonal rains gathered on the summit, pooled in a central basin, and then were guided downslope through a sequence of internal drains to cascade from carved outlets at the edges. Some of those outlets are sculpted as puma heads, their open mouths once spouting sheets of water that flashed like blades in the Andean sun. During storms, the entire pyramid would have awakened, its sides alive with whitewater, the mountain thundering as it bled the sky in measured cascades. What was this for? Ceremony, spectacle, or calibration? Excavators found that the summit court was not merely a pool. Its floor bore slots and negative spaces consistent with removable fittings, perhaps sluice plates, perhaps stone switches that altered flow and pressure. Several conduits include deliberately roughened segments that induce turbulence, a choice that makes no sense if the goal were gentle drainage. It makes perfect sense if the goal were sound. Turbulent flow produces powerful, low-frequency vibrations. Imagine a storm rolling over Tiwanaku, water surging through Acapana's arteries, the pyramid becoming a subsonic instrument that shook the air and ground in a tuned growl. The mountain did not only move water, it played it, and water remembers. Mineral accretions inside certain channels suggest repeated wetting and drying cycles over generations. In a few stretches, the stone bears a faint glassy sheen, a polish that can occur when sediment-laden water scours with force over long durations. At spill points, tool marks appear where surfaces were redressed, as if caretakers tuned the outlets the way one tunes a reed or a lip on a flute. This was maintenance, not repair, the ongoing custodianship of a machine that married hydrology to ritual. To stand halfway up Acapana's flank is to read a manual written in granite. The builders understood head pressure, flow rate, resonance, and structural load with a confidence we still respect. Blocks at key junctions are clamped with eye-shaped metal insets poured into dovetailed sockets. Traces of copper still stain the grooves green. The sockets occur where vibration would be greatest, at elbows, junctions, and outlets, as if the engineers anticipated stress concentrations and armored the joints accordingly. In places, the revetments show interlocks that do not merely abut, but suture, edge profiles biting into one another with keyed tongues and rebates. This is not primitive. This is pragmatic elegance. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have mapped voids and anomalous reflectors beneath the upper tiers. Hollow volumes where no structural necessity demands them. Some align beneath the summit court, others along a diagonal that points toward the Kalasa Saya. Hypotheses multiply. Storage vaults, acoustic chambers, ceremonial crawlways. When a microseismic event rolls across the plateau, sensors on the pyramid sometimes register a faint, repeating response, a double beat that lags the original pulse. The mountain answers. It is as if Acapana inhales the tremor and exhales it back in a different key. The orientation is not casual. The pyramid's axes lock to the same solar geometry as the rest of Tiwanaku. Sunrise and sunset points at the solstices, the winter-noon shadow line, and sight lines toward the Pleiades' heliacal rise. On certain mornings, the shadow of the Kalasa Saya's western wall steps across Acapana's tiers like a colossal finger-counting time. At late afternoon in the dry season, the last blade of light knifes through a gap on the northwest terrace and strikes a stone shoulder that turns it downward, a designed glint that once would have flashed into the running water like a spark. Light and water, angle and flow, the grammar is consistent, the syntax deliberate. And then there is the material choice. Andesite, quarried from distant ridges, moves heat and vibration differently than the local sandstone. The builders positioned the dense andesite along high-stress and high-signal pathways, under channels, at corners, beneath stairways, while deploying sandstone for broad faces. Even without instruments, you can feel the difference. Press your palm to andesite before sunrise, and it holds the night's chill. At noon, it rings brighter when tapped. The mountain was layered not only by mass, but by property, tuned by lithic timbre. Beneath the eastern stair, a trench cuts through centuries of fill to reveal a framed conduit with a narrow throat. Place your ear near it on a windy day, and you catch a muted moan, a throat whistle that rises and falls. Older workers at the site say that before the trench was stabilized, the sound was stronger, like a long, low horn. Was this accidental, or was the stair designed to voice the mountain when the wind turned from the lake? Water, wind, and stone, 3 instruments sharing one score. No text explains any of this. There are no inscriptions, no carved instructions, no boastful dedications. The monument's authors hid their authorship, or perhaps considered it irrelevant. What remains is the act, a mountain built to behave, a architecture that does something reliably and repeatably with forces larger than human muscle. When the rains came, the pyramid woke. When they ceased, it slept. Between those states, it kept time with the sun. Acapana's neighbors complete the ensemble. To its west, Puma Punku with its modular blocks and metallic clamps. To its north, the Kalasasaya with its sky gate and shadow calendar. To its east, residential compounds align to sightlines like an audience to a stage. The city is not a crowd of buildings. It is a single instrument with sections, strings, winds, percussion, each tuned to a scale of stone. And if the instrument had a conductor, he would have stood on Acapana's summit, hands spread to the water and sky. The excavators who cleared the top platform found sockets for uprights and pavements with repeated wear arcs, crescents polished by the same ritual path traced countless times. In the middle of the sunken court, a basin stone sits slightly off-center, as if aligned not to the platform's geometry, but to a star's rising or a peak's notch. Samples from that basin's interior hold a residue rich in evaporites and microscopic plant silica. The simplest reading is a reflecting pool where offerings were placed. Another reading, an optical surface, a liquid mirror tuned by depth to catch a precise patch of sky at specific dates. A standing astronomer would have looked down into a star. Who designed such a union of fluid, stone, and heaven? Where did they learn the arithmetic of turbulence and reflection, the patient grammar of tear and flow? The official timeline points to centuries of local experimentation, to a culture that observed and refined until a hill became an instrument. The myths point to teachers who carried templates, a memory of how water, light, and sound make a temple work. Somewhere between these poles lies the truth, a people genius enough to build, and perhaps a spark from elsewhere that showed what could be built. Even the scars tell a story. In the rubble of the lower terraces, stone fragments show abrupt vitrification, a thin glaze as if fire had licked the surface and then fled. Lightning strike, ritual fire, catastrophe. One break face reveals a sealed channel filled with compacted silt and ceramic flecks, as if a sudden slurry once roared through, then stilled and hardened. The mountain has survived more than seasons. It has kept standing after a violence that forced its arteries shut. And still, when storms roll in from Titicaca, threads of water find the old paths. The first trickles feel their way through joints and conduits. Outlets gargle alive. A puma's mouth darkens as it drinks the rain. For a few minutes, Acapana remembers itself. If you stand close, you can feel the vibration in your ribs, a quiet, insistent thrum. It is easy in that moment to believe the elders when they say the pyramid was built to call, to summon the teachers who once walked here by letting the mountains sing with the voice of the sky. Perhaps that is why the prophecies bind Acapana to the return. When the fifth sun rises, they say, the terraces will blaze, the channels will run gold, and the sound in the stone will match the sound in the air. The gate will hear the mountain will answer the lake, the circuit will close. If the city is a machine for memory, this is its heart's engine, not below the water but raised to the light, where anyone may climb and feel the instructions underfoot. The question that remains is the question that has always haunted Tiwanaku. Whose instructions? Whose hand sketched the first plan? Whose knowledge chose these angles and these conduits? Whose voice is encoded in the thunder that the terraces make? Archaeology can measure, map, and model. It can reconstruct flow rates, simulate resonance, project sightlines. It can prove the intelligence of the design. What it cannot do, what it refuses to do, is name the teacher when the signature appears only as a perfect solution. And yet the signature is there, in every joint that never slips, in every channel that never floods, in every shadow that strikes its mark on the same morning year after year. Acapana does not argue. It performs. It asks us to listen. Because if the engineers of Tiwanaku left a mark, they did so the way true masters do, not with carved names, but with inevitabilities. Water that must flow this way, light that must fall here, stone that must sing this note when the wind turns from the lake. To read that signature is to admit a lineage, either an unbroken Andean genius reaching into a forgotten antiquity, or a transmission from minds who first learned the grammar of mountains under a different sky. And at the summit, where the pool once held a star, you cannot help but feel that the next page of this manual is already turning. The conduits remain, the alignments remain, the storms are changing, the tones deepen, something is rehearsing. What happens when the instrument is played again as it was designed to be? Who, or what, answers a mountain when it sings? The evidence points to more than craftsmanship. It points to intent, to a mind that meant this place to be heard. To trace that mind, we must leave the terraces and descend into the details. The tool marks that never quite fit copper alone, the alloys poured like lightning into living stone, the repeatable modules that suggest a template shared across oceans. Because hidden in the joins and grooves of Tiwanaku is a mark no storm can erase, the engineer's signature, and following that signature may finally reveal the hands that taught the Andes to build. The engineer's signature. Every craftsman leaves a trace, a rhythm in the chisel stroke, a choice of angle, a method for solving the same eternal problems of weight and balance. Across time, those traces become a signature. When archaeologists first began to map the precision of Tiwanaku's masonry in 3 dimensions, they noticed something unsettling. The same solutions, the same junctions, the same recesses, the same metal clamps appear at other megalithic sites half a world away. To the academic mind, this should be impossible. The Andes were isolated, sealed behind oceans and mountains until the modern age. Yet stone does not lie. Its cuts and angles carry a dialect that repeats from hemisphere to hemisphere, as if all the builders once learned from the same teacher. The first clue is geometry. At Tiwanaku, the favored proportion is the golden mean, 1:1:6:18, repeated in lintels, courtyards, and stairways. At Egypt's Giza Plateau, the same ratio governs the slope of the Great Pyramid and the dimensions of its chambers. The ziggurats of Sumer follow it as well, though the builders could not have known of either land. Even the base of the pyramid at Cholula in Mexico mirrors the same harmonic relation, a single mathematical fingerprint etched into stone from the Andes to the Nile to the Euphrates. Then there are the tools. On the surfaces of Puma Punku's blocks, microscopic striations appear, parallel grooves, equidistant, consistent in depth, marks that suggest rotary cutting or abrasive sawing. The same pattern decorates granite fragments in Egypt's Aswan quarries, where curved drill traces spiral through diorite harder than steel. In both cases, the radius of curvature and feed rate are nearly identical. The instruments may have differed, but the technique is the same, a high-speed rotation guided by steady mechanical pressure. Who taught 2 cultures separated by oceans to carve stone as though it were buttered clay? The metallic clamps deepen the mystery. At Tiwanaku, H-shaped fittings of copper arsenic nickel alloy were poured molten into dovetail sockets linking adjacent blocks. In India's Vijayanagar ruins, similar clamps, same shape, same alloy composition, join granite beams. In Egypt's Temple of Abydos, archaeologists have documented T-shaped dovetails filled with bronze, so precisely fitted that the seams are invisible. In Peru, the clamps often show traces of high magnetic orientation, as if cooled under a field of energy. No ancient smelter could generate the necessary uniformity, and yet these details repeat. The same engineering handwriting, even the method of modular design, the interlocking Lego principle of uniform blocks that can be replaced or rearranged, occurs in every cradle of civilization. The H blocks of Puma Punku correspond in dimension to the foundation modules of Baalbek in Lebanon and to the Ashlar code used in the Temple of Osiris at Abydos. All employ the same triple-step recession, the same tongue and groove interface, the same half-depth key that transfers vertical load into horizontal stability. It is not cultural coincidence. It is a shared theorem in stone. And then there is water. Akapana's hidden plumbing finds an echo beneath the Great Pyramid, where subterranean channels once carried the rising Nile into the base. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, too, possessed drains that directed water through internal cores. In each case, the movement of liquid served not only ritual, but resonance, flow, vibration and sound were coupled. The engineers of these distant worlds used fluid and pressure to make their temples breathe. Could this global recurrence arise from convergent evolution, minds solving the same physical problems the same way? Possibly, yet the more the data accumulates, the more the pattern resembles memory rather than coincidence. For beneath every design lies the same triad: geometry, resonance, and light. Egyptian temples, when struck by sunlight, channel beams through long corridors to illuminate altars at exact dates of the solar year. The Kalasasaya does the same, marking solstice sunrise through its gate. The ziggurats align to equinox shadows. The Maya pyramids at Chichen Itza summon a serpent of light down their stairs on the same days. Different continents, different materials, one cosmic synchronization. It is as if each civilization inherited a manual, a book without words composed of ratios and alignments, explaining how to anchor heaven in stone. Even myth seems to remember the same architect. In Sumer, he is Ea, the wise one, who rose from the sea to teach the arts of civilization. In Egypt, he is Thoth, master of measure, who gave writing and geometry. In Mesoamerica, he is Quetzalcoatl, the white, bearded bringer of knowledge. And in the Andes, he is Viracocha, the radiant one who taught humans to build with precision and compassion. Each is depicted carrying a staff, each surrounded by rays or serpents of light, each associated with water and the stars. Different names, same teacher. Perhaps not one individual, but a brotherhood, an order of engineers, astronomers, and sages who traveled the world in the ages before recorded history, seeding the sciences of measure and harmony wherever survivors of the last cataclysm still breathed. When their task was complete, they vanished, leaving behind self-teaching monuments, temples that demonstrate their principles to any who study them with humility and reason. Evidence of such a brotherhood may lie in something as subtle as a carving's proportion. At Tiwanaku, the ratio between base width and height in ceremonial gateways is 1.2, the diagonal of the square, symbol of the link between earth and heaven. The same ratio defines the inner sanctum of Karnak in Egypt and the foundation stones of Stonehenge. In later ages, architects called it the sacred cut. In the Andes, it was known as the stair of light. The pattern extends even to iconography. The stepped motif called the chacana, or Andean cross, representing the three worlds, underworld, earth, and sky, appears in Mesopotamian cylinder seals as the stairway of Anu, in Egyptian reliefs as the Djed pillar, in Mesoamerican art as the cross of Quetzalcoatl. It is the same schema of ascent. It is the same language of connection. Is it possible that these civilizations were fragments of a single, pre-Diluvian culture? What Plato's dialogue called Atlantis, what the Andean elders remember as Paititi, the city of the sun. If so, Tiwanaku may not be its echo, but its direct descendant, the high-altitude refuge where knowledge survived the flood. Geological studies show that Lake Titicaca once lay thousands of feet lower before tectonic uplift raised the plateau. The ruins at its shores might once have stood at sea level. If the ocean truly reached these mountains in some forgotten epoch, then the sea gods of Viracocha's legend were not mythic at all. They were navigators returning home. Across cultures, the same star markers guided them: Orion's belt, the Pleiades, Sirius. These were not only celestial points, but coordinates, a cosmic signature linking every temple on Earth. When mapped globally, the great monuments align along geodesic arcs that mirror these constellations. From Giza through Petra and Ur to Tiwanaku and Easter Island, they fall upon a great circle tilted 30 degrees from the equator, as if placed by one hand to form the outline of the sky upon the earth. Coincidence again? Or memory crystallized in architecture? Even the metals tell the same story. The alloys used for clamps and ornamentation at Tiwanaku match those in the pre-dynastic sites of Egypt and the Bronze Age workshops of Anatolia. Combinations of copper, arsenic, and nickel resistant to corrosion. The ratios are nearly exact. Analytical labs find similar microstructures, as though the smiths shared not only recipes but furnaces tuned to identical temperatures. How could knowledge so specialized leap oceans in an age before ships, before writing, unless the ships existed and the writing was the geometry itself? The Andean chroniclers often said that Viracochas' followers sailed upon the sea of the stars. Perhaps that was never meant metaphorically. Perhaps they crossed both kinds of sea, the ocean of water and the ocean of night, carrying their formulas in memory, their compasses set by constellations we still revere. And now the same signature surfaces in the digital scans of every ruin. Ratios, alignments, alloys, and myths, all echoing one another like chords in a global composition. It is no longer a question of whether the pattern exists, but what it means. Was the Brotherhood human, the remnant of a forgotten terrestrial civilization? Or were they, as legend insists, beings from the heavens who came to rebuild after the world drowned? Whatever their origin, their message remains written across continents. Measure, align, harmonize. Recreate the order of the cosmos in the matter of the earth. In doing so, remember your source. Perhaps that is the real signature, not in metal or stone, but in intent. The drive to connect heaven and earth, to turn chaos into symmetry, darkness into light. It is the impulse that built Tiwanaku, that raised the pyramids, that carved Baalbek stones, that shaped every temple pointing to the same stars. It is the mark of those who remember. And if this lineage truly spans the globe, then its final page may still be unwritten, waiting for humanity to rediscover the unity its teachers once embodied. For the gods of the Andes were never alone. Their song was the world's first language, and its echoes still ring from one mountain to another, across oceans, across time. But to follow the echo to its source, we must climb higher still, to the stars themselves. Because if the same engineer's signature binds the earth, then somewhere above in the architecture of the cosmos, their home must also bear that mark. And that is where the trail now leads. Beyond the mountains, beyond the blue atmosphere, to the constellation that all ancient cultures revered as the origin of gods and men. To the place the Andeans called Colca, the storehouse of the sky, what we know as the Pleiades. The storehouse of the sky, they called it Colca, the storehouse of the sky. 7 lights, trembling in the black sea of night, small and delicate yet commanding reverence from every civilization that ever looked upward. The Greeks named them the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. To the Andeans, they were the celestial granary, the source from which the gods measured the seasons of abundance and the cycles of the soul. Every ancient culture knew their faces. Every people told the same story. The Maori of Aotearoa greeted them as Matariki, the eyes of the gods watching over creation. The Navajo called them Diliehe, the sparks of fire carried by holy ones through the dark. The Japanese knew them as Subaru, meaning unity. The Mayans saw in them the hearthstones of the cosmic kitchen where the universe was first kindled. And high in the Andes, the Quechua looked upon those same 7 sparks and whispered, "Our ancestors lived there." How could people separated by oceans and millennia all fix their gaze upon the same fragile constellation and declare, "That is home"? Perhaps because the memory of its light was already within us. The priests of Tiwanaku taught that Viracocha descended from Colca during the age before the flood. He came, they said, through a river of stars that connected heaven and earth, the Milky Way. When the floods receded and the first dawn rose, his reflection shone in Lake Titicaca. That reflection, they said, was the moment when sky and water, light and matter, consciousness and form became one. To them, the Pleiades were not simply stars. They were the living archive of creation, the storehouse where the design of life was kept in luminous pattern. The Andean word colca also meant granary, repository, memory. The gods of the Andes did not store grain alone. They stored the seeds of knowledge, light condensed into geometry, and they left markers on Earth so that when humankind forgot, we could look upward and remember. At Tiwanaku, at Giza, at Angkor, and at Chichen Itza, the temples are aligned so that on the same nights of the year, the Pleiades rise exactly above their central axes. The probability of coincidence is microscopic. These are synchronizations across the globe, orchestrated by architects who could not possibly have known one another unless they all inherited the same map. The Pleiades are the key. When we project the positions of the major ancient monuments onto a celestial sphere, something extraordinary appears. The Giza pyramids, Stonehenge, Tiwanaku, Teotihuacan, and Easter Island all fall along geodesic arcs that mirror the angular separations between the Pleiades and Orion in the night sky. It is as though the Earth was shaped into a model of the heavens, a mirror reflecting that small cluster of light. But why that cluster? Astronomers now tell us that the Pleiades lie within a vast region of interstellar dust and magnetic turbulence known as the Taurus molecular cloud, one of the most active nurseries of new stars in the galaxy. It is literally a storehouse of creation, a place where matter condenses into light, where the universe gives birth. The ancients could not have known this scientifically, yet somehow they spoke of it as if they did. The Andean hymns describe Kolka as the womb of the dawn and the cradle of the shining ones. Egyptian texts refer to a star group called the Seven Hathors, who watched over rebirth and guided the souls of the dead to the next world. In both traditions, the number 7 is sacred, the symbol of renewal. Could the ancients have intuited, or been shown, that these stars truly were the birthplace of suns? The myths grow bolder. In every culture, the gods who came from the Pleiades are described as luminous, compassionate, and wise. They bring order out of chaos, knowledge out of ignorance. They teach the cycles of agriculture, the movements of the heavens, the harmony of sound and color. Then, when humanity begins to forget, they leave, promising to return when the stars realign. The Andeans spoke of them as Viracochas, the radiant travelers. The Greeks knew them as the Atlantes, the bearers of the sky. The Hopi called them the Chuhukon, the teachers from the blue stars. Different lands, same memory. Is it possible that the constellations themselves are not merely maps, but addresses, markers of origin for beings who traversed both matter and meaning? If so, the builders of Tiwanaku may have encoded those coordinates in stone, creating a terrestrial reflection of the sky to maintain resonance with their cosmic home. Archaeoastronomers studying the Kalasasaya temple found that its eastern and western walls form a precise frame for the Pleiades' heliacal rising, the moment they first appear before dawn after their annual disappearance behind the sun. That event was the Andean New Year, signaling planting time and renewal. But the mythic texts add another layer. The rising of the Pleiades also signaled the opening of the portal through which the luminous ones could once again descend. In other words, astronomy and myth are the same story told in two tongues. The Pleiades are the hinge between heaven and earth, between creation and remembrance. The ancients watched them not out of superstition, but because they knew that when those stars returned to the sky after their season of invisibility, the cosmic gate was open. Could that gate open again? Modern science speaks of cosmic radiation bursts, of waves of high-energy particles that sweep through the solar system in cycles of tens of thousands of years, the pulse of the galaxy itself. When such a wave passes, magnetic fields shift, climates change, and biological evolution surges. Some theorists suggest we are entering another of these pulses now, a photonic belt surrounding the Pleiades. The ancients, if they knew this, might have written it as prophecy. When the storehouse of the sky shines brighter than ever before, the earth will awaken. Indeed, astronomers confirm that the Pleiades have grown more luminous in the last century as our system drifts closer to the outer edge of that nebular field. Perhaps the return of the gods is not a physical descent, but a literal influx of light, a wave of higher energy bathing the planet, quickening every form of life. It would explain why cultures separated by ages all spoke of the same moment, the rising of the seven stars, the renewal of the sun, the remembering of humanity. From that perspective, Tiwanaku, Giza, and every other sacred site were not mere temples, they were receivers, tuned to the frequency of the cosmos, ready to resonate when the great pulse arrives. Their geometry was not symbolic, it was functional, like antennae awaiting the signal of home. Perhaps that signal is beginning to reach us. Humanity is restless, seeking connection across distance, reviving old sciences of vibration and energy. Everywhere, art and architecture once again imitate the patterns of light and spiral. Without realizing it, we are rebuilding the memory of Kolka, the geometry of the stars reborn in our machines, our circuits, our networks. The ancient storehouse is reopening through us, and when the pulse peaks, when the Pleiades blaze at dawn over the Andes and the waters of Titicaca shimmer gold, the old circuit will complete. The gate will hear the mountain will hear the lake, and the voice of Viracocha will rise through all. The storehouse of the sky will pour its light into the world once more. And in that moment, the forgotten gods of the Andes will no longer look down from heaven. They will look out through human eyes, for their light and ours were never different. The return of the Pleiades will be the return of memory, the dawn of the fifth sun. The fifth sun. The ancients said the world is born 5 times. 4 suns have risen and fallen, each an age of light and forgetting. And now the 5th begins to stir. Across the high Andes, dawn spreads slowly. A sheet of gold brushing snow peaks, the light pouring down into the plains where Tiwanaku sleeps. The stones glow faintly, as if remembering the warmth that once forged them. The wind carries a low hum through the gate of the sun, a tone that seems almost deliberate. It is not loud, but it vibrates in the chest like a heartbeat. The people who still live on this plateau pause when they hear it. They know the sound. Their grandparents told them it would come again when the 5th sun returned. In their language, the word for this new age is Pachacuti, the world turned over, the restoration of balance. But in every tongue, it means the same thing, awakening. All over the planet, something shifts. Instruments record new frequencies pulsing through the ionosphere. Solar winds dance with more intensity. The Earth's magnetic poles waver as if testing their equilibrium. Science observes the symptoms, but myth knows the cause. The storehouse of the sky has opened. The pulse from the Pleiades has reached us, and the forgotten circuit of the gods begins to hum again. In the altars of the world, from Giza to Stonehenge, from Angkor to the Andes, the same alignments reassert themselves. The morning sun passes through gates built thousands of years apart, yet designed for this same dawn. Shadow and light once more trace the geometry of memory. It is not coincidence. It is choreography. The temples were never meant to outlive humanity's curiosity. They were built to wait. They were clocks set to cosmic time, receivers buried in stone until their frequency returned. And now the tuning begins. The priests of old spoke of this moment not as an end, but as a remembering, the instant when mankind would rediscover the language of sound and light, when science and spirit would cease their quarrel and realize they had always been one discipline. The 5th age would not belong to gods descending from the sky, but to humans ascending in awareness, rediscovering that the spark within is the same light that shines from the Pleiades. The prophecy unfolds quietly. A scientist in Cusco captures inaudible tones from beneath Tiwanaku, patterns that form harmonic ratios. An astronomer in Japan notices a synchronization between solar cycles and the rhythm of the Earth's resonance. Artists across the world begin painting the same image without knowing why. A circle of 7 stars above a golden gate. The memory is leaking through the collective mind, as if humanity itself is awakening from a long sleep. Perhaps that was the true intention of Viracocha and the sky beings. They did not come to rule. They came to plant an idea that civilization itself could be an act of worship, that every block of stone could hold a note of the divine song. When their work was complete, they left, knowing the melody would continue underground, beneath water, beneath history, waiting for the next dawn to call it back. And now the call resounds. The fifth sun rises, not only over the Andes, but within every heart that remembers. It is not fire in the sky, it is recognition, the realization that the universe is alive, that creation is ongoing, and that we are its voice. The myths said that when Viracocha returns, he will walk across the waters once more, clothed in light. Maybe he already has, not as one being, but as all of us, walking toward a future shaped by harmony rather than fear. In that sense, the gods of the Andes were right. The fifth sun is not a promise. It is a choice. Every temple, every myth, every carved face was a reminder of that truth. We are the bridge between heaven and earth. The light of Kolka burns within our cells. The song of creation vibrates in our blood. The gods never abandoned us. They became us. As the sun crests the horizon above Tiwanaku, its first ray pierces the gate of the sun. For a breathless instant, the carving of Viracocha blazes with fire. The tear beneath his eye glints like molten gold. The light passes through, strikes the temple floor, and vanishes. A heartbeat in stone, and then silence. A silence so vast it feels alive, as though the world itself is holding its breath. Because somewhere, deep below the lake, deep beneath the mountains, the heart of Viracocha stirs, and the hum returns, steady and strong. The fifth sun has awakened, and humanity, after thousands of years of darkness, remembers who it is, not the children of chance, but the descendants of light.